Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. Well, I just cracked a little bit there.
Oh,
Podcast! PlayStation! This is episode 246. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined, as always, by my son, Chris Reagan. Chris, you look like you're about to go, I don't know, you look like a goon in an 80s movie.
Yeah,
of some sort. Hey, Paulie, get him! You know, and then you get up and you rough him up a little bit. Yeah, you look great. How's it going?
Thanks. I mean, you know, everything's ramping up now. It's basically every day. So my body hurts constantly. So that's fun.
I'm sorry. Are you happy you did this?
As it goes on, it's less so. Like I start to think like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. But I don't know. It's the home stretch. I think I'm both excited for the fight, but also excited to have my life back in some way. I think like a lot of the people feel kind of the same way. I was talking to some of the other fighters and was like, yeah, this is cool, but also like, yeah, I miss not being punched in the face every day.
I was gonna say it's not only that, it's like just you're not getting paid, right? It's just the training is for like you get the training and you get to go and it's for charity.
It's a charity thing,
but it asks more for charity than I think I've ever seen anything ask for charity. Like
exactly. So I better hear no complaining.
I mean,
anybody ever again. No one's anybody who's ever going to criticize me. Go do this. Huh? Go do something for charity like this. Bet you won't.
Yeah, definitely.
Bet you can't.
Bet you can't. Yeah, I can't. Oh my God, I would have quit. Not even the physical thing. I work out every day. I like working out, but it's just the time. It's like I got to go play Wild Arms too, man. I can't be here in the ring with you. I don't got time for this. What do you think this is? Dustin Furman, executive producer. Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I've had something that's been occupying my mind the last few days, and I realized this. I don't know if this is just part of now being very late 20s. I mean, I'm practically 30. But this issue where I hate my pillow. I feel like I wake up, I'm in pain. Is it a me problem? Is it a pillow problem? But then you go to look online to try to, like, oh, I'm going to get a new pillow. Well, good fucking luck. Because
pillow shopping sucks, dude.
I don't know what to do, because do you just go out and get a cheaper one and be like, well, it's just a pillow, right? Do you spend $100 more than $200? How much do you spend? How much should you spend?
Yeah. Here's the thing is I love pillows, and I go through this thing too, where I'm just not satisfied with my pillows often. I just rotate them in. I sleep with 3 pillows, 2 regular ones, and then a long one. That's the length of 2 pillows. I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial here, although I'm just talking about the product. You know what's a pretty good pillow?
Don't say it.
I'm going to say it.
You're going to say it. Do it, dude.
My Pillow is a good. My Pillow is a good pillow. Like I bought a My Pillow last year for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's pretty good. I got to be honest with you. It does the trick. And I like it a lot. I think there's different varieties. And in fact, I think they released the My Pillow 2 I've been seeing ads for. So who the hell knows what that is? But
there's a sequel to a pillow.
Yeah, I don't know what it. So like, it's really good. It's that guy obviously Mike Lindell is strange cat. When I bought the pillow, you get a free copy of his book about being an addict.
That is insane.
And I gotta be honest, I threw it away. I don't usually like throwing books away, but I'm throwing this thing away. I didn't ask for this.
It comes with a sleep aid. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
you know,
just read that.
A bunch of little stories to put you to sleep.
It also came with one of those covers. You know, when you were a kid, you had the cover. It sounded like you're spinning, like you're scratching on a turntable. You know that kind of cover?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it was like,
was he like 3D on the front?
Yeah, because
really?
The picture is him. One of them is him in his mugshot, I guess, or something like that, and then the other is him, clean. And to his credit, so the frustrating thing about Mike Lindell, in my opinion, and I don't really know very much about him, but is he actually has a really uplifting story. He's just fucked it all up by being kind of nuts. And I'm not even talking about the Trump stuff or him being aligned with Trump. That's one thing, but just how deep he's gone into like Dominion voting machines and all this shit. And I'm like, man, but nonetheless, if you want to fund the Trump lawsuits, go buy a My Pillow, because that's what I did, and it was pretty good. Chris.
So it's always a shame when there's like an uplifting story that's just kind of like, it's like you could have lost all that weight with the sandwiches and just left it at that.
Right. Oh my God.
And then
Tell me
would've been
about it.
fine.
Oh my God. You're right. Jared.
You know, I'm gonna say something crazy that I think
Please.
sometimes I don't sleep with a pillow at all. Like at all.
I've actually heard about this.
Micah does that too.
I've tried it. I can't do it, but I respect it.
Yeah, like I don't make a conscious effort, but sometimes I'm like, you know what? It's sometimes, you know, when the pillow's like too hot and like you flip it over and then it's cool, it's cold, but it's only cold for like 5 seconds maximum because it's just that kind of a night. And it's just like, you know what? It's not worth it. And for some reason, the mattress itself doesn't retain heat like a pillow does. I don't know what the hell that's about, but it's just comfortable sometimes to just not deal with the pillow at all. But I don't know.
I have a lot to think about. You know, if you buy the MyPillow, do I need to release a statement or something like that? Do I go for it?
Just go for it. Who cares?
Some other ones, you know,
you know what the reality is?
Whatever.
They're made in America. They're made completely in America by American labor.
Yeah,
which is cool. So again, it's like all these things you want to like,
right?
Including a pretty good product. But some people hate MyPillow too, so you should definitely like look into it. It's a very unique thing. You got to do a little work to get the most out of your MyPillow. I think you got to like put it in the dryer and do shit like that, but it works.
You got to dump some of it out, right?
I didn't do that. I don't know. I didn't do any of that. I can't say I did that.
I don't know.
Okay.
All right, that's enough. And MyPillow sponsors like everything in the world. Sponsor the show if you want. I don't care. I'll take your money. That's fine with me.
Mike,
MyPillow promo code SACRED. That's not a real promo code. All right. Welcome to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. We go up each and every week, and you can get us 3 days early and ad-free over on Patreon, including no MyPillow ads, even though we don't have MyPillow ads at patreon.com/laststandmedia. We appreciate your support over there. Something like 12,600 and something of you over there right now. Thank you so much. The $5 tier is the most popular tier. That's where you probably want to be to start. This gives you early ad-free access to all of our shows, including Defining Duke, our Xbox podcast, Constellation, our conversational podcast, Knockback, our nostalgia podcast, 2 episodes of Sacred Symbols Plus every single week, which is our supplement. And recent episodes include 9 independent episodes on The Last of Us on HBO that are all done. That's about, I said 20 hours on social media, but that's not quite true. It's more like 18 and a half hours, I think. Sacred Symbols, Cross Defining Duke. We recently did that. We did a fake publishers game where we each drafted our mock publishers for no reason other than to see what we would come up with. And that was really fun. Dustin and Ben, right? And
Correct.
Carolyn, previously of Limited Run Games, joined them for a Hogwarts Legacy spoiler cast and review discussion. I have a very politically charged conversation about J.K. Rowling to put up that I did with Noam Bloom. Also about Hogwarts Legacy. We're going to publish those at the same time like we promised, and I'll explain more in that podcast. If you want to hear it, you'll have to opt into that. Dead Space remake spoiler cast went up recently. That was fun. I had a conversation with my best friend Ramon about his rediscovery of video games, which I thought was really fun as well. And Sacred Sales Saga will return soon as well. New sales charts just went out. An Evening with Last Stand 2 was in Houston in late February. People have been asking about the video. I must admit, and it's my fault, like we haven't communicated enough about this. And so we're going to continue to do so. So what's the plan here?
Let's communicate about it right now, Colin, because I've got all the info. We said it wouldn't be long, and I got a release date for you guys. March 24th. If you're listening to this on release day on Patreon, that's next Friday. Or if you're listening on Monday, that's this Friday. And I'm really excited for you guys to see this. We had the same crew from Sacred 200 come out, Catalog Co. They did an amazing job and edited by yours truly. And it is looking so good. It's shot in 4K on cinema grade cameras, and the audio is super crispy clear. Everything. I'm really proud of this. Like, truly, I'm really excited for you guys to see it. And so next Friday at 7:30 is when it's going to release on Patreon at the $5 tier. Now, we talked about this a bit last week, but I think it's worth repeating that this is one of the most expensive aspects of the show for us to get made. And so we will be locking it there for 6 months. So obviously you can just sign, if you really want to, you can sign up at the $5 tier, come on in, watch it, download as much as you want. If you need to leave, that's okay too. But I think that once you're there, you'll like what you see. Now, the other detail, the Discord watch party. I mentioned this last week. We are doing it. And so here's how it's going to work. The Discord party starts at 8:30 p.m. And that little bit of gap there is so You can either watch on the Discord app, which basically we have a voice channel, which you can do this YouTube thing where everyone can view together. There will be no voice chat though. It's just going to be text only, so everyone can interact and have a good time seeing the show for the first time. But the reason there's that gap is that if you want to participate on Discord, but you want to see it on your amazing 4K TV in its most pristine quality, then you'll have time to queue it up, and then you'll just want to hit play at 8:30 EST in order to watch along with us. And I think that's about it. If you were there, make sure, do not post any spoilers, please. People are going to be excited to see and react as we, watch the show together. There's going to be all this info in a Patreon post shortly after the release of this show tomorrow or today. I guess at 1 p.m. Very soon, you can get all this info dump so you know exactly what to expect. You can look there for the reference.
Dump.
We're just dumping it. We're just dumping all over you.
I love
all this good stuff.
I want an info dump Cleveland steamer. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for that. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right, so that's exciting. And we'll
exciting.
have that to look forward to. And then, of course, you can support us with merch. laststandmedia.store. Free shipping on all stickers domestically here in the United States. You can buy shirts, sweatshirts, hats, etc. We appreciate you. That's all in-house, by the way. Okay. Yes. My friends, let's get into some inquiries from the audience as we begin to stretch our legs here on Sacred Symbols, the PlayStation podcast. We'll start with AJB, who said, "Hey guys, no question, just a comment. I've been really struggling lately with a massive amount of stress at my job as I just took over a new business unit. I've not had time to see friends and barely any time with my wife and kids due to constant travel for the last 6 months. Last week, I was at a pretty low point while I was listening. Chris bringing up that Ninja Turtle face honestly was something I needed. I instantly knew exactly what he was talking about, and I was laughing just as much as you guys in that moment. Honestly, this is why I love the show. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time, and I needed it. You guys have the best way of making listeners feel like they are part of the show, and I hope that never changes. Laughing really is the best medicine." And by the way, Chris, for you, I was saying that in the Kramer voice. You know what I mean? And when he's like, "And laughter is the best medicine." I don't know like what episode that is, but he says that at some point.
Oh man, I don't know.
I think when he's faking being the doctor or something like that. But that's,
probably. No, it's when he's taking the class to be, where he's taking that acting class where he has to pretend he has to be a mock patient for like a doctor's to diagnose. But
with
dude,
Mickey,
that face is I love that image. That is one of my favorite images on the internet. It cracks me up every time I see it.
Yeah, that was a phenomenon with our audience. They really enjoyed that. So thanks for making AJ laugh, Chris. We appreciate you. And AJ, stay well out there. Be strong.
There's a clip of it if you want to revisit on Sacred Symbols Clips. I called it. Well, I wanted to check with you guys because I called the clip the biggest laugh in Sacred Symbols history. Is that true? I was, as long as I've been here, that was the biggest outburst.
It felt like it to me. Like the last time I remember laughing like that was like maybe Shump back in the day.
Yeah,
but that was like a very, 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 very long time ago.
Shumps. Yeah, that was a good laugh. And as I get older and the world wears on me and we get closer to nuclear calamity, I laugh less and less. So it's good to. And laughter is the best medicine. AJ, be well out there. And hey, I have a suggestion for you, AJ. This is a radical suggestion, but it is 2023. You're missing your wife and kids and you're always traveling. You got to get yourself some wife and kids when you're traveling. You know, in other words, an away team. You don't want to do that. That's mean. Chris Kenningham wrote in and said, "Hey guys, I recently just lived through what felt like the B plot of a Seinfeld episode and thought you all would enjoy it. The CEO of my company prides himself on knowing all of his employees' names. Recently, he accidentally called me Kev instead of my actual name in front of the board of the company. As to not embarrass him, I didn't correct him and moved on. A few days later, he sees me in the hallways and once again calls me Kev. This man officially thinks my name is Kevin by this point, and I don't know how to tell him since I already responded to it. This goes on for months without me saying something. I'm in too deep at this point. I begin to wonder if I should just legally change my name to Kev so that way I don't have to have the embarrassing conversation of telling him that that's not my name. Up until last week, when he heard someone refer to me by my actual name, did he apologize and say that he was embarrassed for calling me by the wrong name? Just thought you guys would find this funny, as everyone else I tell does. Have a great one, and make sure to take that chicken out for some ice cream every now and again. Thanks for making every week a little less shitty." Thank you, Chris, for writing in. Kevin. I understand. I haven't I've said this in the past that Colin Powell really fucked up everything for Collins, because we went around for years saying, no, our name is not said Colin. It is Colin. It's Colin, Colin. And then this asshole, the Secretary of State, comes out and says, no, it's Colin. And everyone, and we were all like, are you kidding me? So then from that point on, you started to kind of get that sometimes because people didn't know again. Is it Colin? Is it Colin? Like, it's not Colin, dude. Why are you allowing people to call you? You're the Secretary of State.
It is crazy.
It's Colin Powell, although he still goes by Colin Powell. And I just wanted to say that I know what that's like, because there's a more minor version of that, which is people spelling my name with 2 L's, which is
like Phil Collins.
Right, like Colin, like that, which is a more British way of spelling the name Colin. Or, and you guys will appreciate this because this is hysterical and I hadn't thought about this in years. I had a Filipino landlord when I lived in the gay house in San Francisco that I always talk about, where everyone was gay. And this guy his name was Rico, and he was a really nice guy. He knew my name was Colin. He would call me Colin, but in all written correspondence for years, I lived there for 3 years, he would write Collins, Collins.
That's your first
name? And that's how he would spell my name. So he would call me Colin. Hey, Colin, how you doing? But then when he would write like a note on the kitchen counter, be like, Collins, please take out the trash or whatever. It's like, What is this? Are you? I didn't know if it was like a like, are you trying to dominate me in some way?
Maybe he thought you had multiple personalities.
Yeah.
You know, and he was just talking to all of you.
He was confused.
My problem is always people calling me Justin. And I see comments sometimes where people will say Justin.
Yeah.
Like, Justin, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, slow down. But that's a normal thing my whole life. Now, in Chris's situation here, what he should have done is that after that meeting concluded, is talk to the CEO one-on-one and just lay it out. Be like, hey, I wanted to make sure that I let you know that this is my name. I didn't want to, and just be honest. Say, I didn't want to correct you in front of everybody, but just so, we don't have to have this conversation yet. This is my name. You probably would appreciate that. I would have. I mean, if that happened to me and someone said, hey, I specifically didn't correct you to not make you look dumb in front of people. Here's the truth, though. I'd be like, dude, thank you. Appreciate that. Like if someone was to say, hey, your fly's down in front of a big group of people, that sucks. They come and whisper in your ear, hey, just so you know, your fly's down. Huge difference. Mm-hmm. It's a respect thing.
Mm-hmm. This has inspired me to potentially in the future, like if I have a child in some way, I feel like I would want to name it something like Justin or Joe with a D, like Django almost.
or the musical genre gent.
Yeah, exactly. Just a silent D at the beginning of the name, just to throw everybody off.
Love it.
It's
very exotic too. It adds an exotic nature to it as well.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I feel like D apostrophe Django. Like Django's a cool name, quite frankly.
Yeah, it is. It is a cool name. It's you see a lot of great names watching football. Just really, really amazing names and nicknames as well. Jackrabbit Jenkins. That's a hell of a name, right?
Wow.
That's a hell of a name. By the way, guys, I have something I want to share with you.
At this point, as I sit here, I think since Friday, I made it clear that my intention was to play, and my intention was to play for the New York Jets.
Yeah, it's just wanted to let everyone know.
That's exciting. Who's that?
Aaron Rodgers. We're going to the Super Bowl. Yeah. You know what? Playoffs or bust. That's it. That's all I want. Ideally, home playoff game. Will Colin go to that? Oh yeah, he'll be there.
Whoa, homecoming.
Dude, if there is a home playoff game, which I think would be the first time we've had a home playoff game, I think we might have had one in 2002, but in 1998, I think we had one as well. That's rare for the Jets. We haven't even been in the playoffs since 2010. So, oh yeah, I can't wait to hear that first Jets chant at the first home game with Aaron Rodgers behind center. Oh, a lot of promise, my friends. It's very exciting. I needed to acknowledge it because I know a lot of people wrote in about it. I didn't take any of your letters. I appreciate it. It's very exciting. It's like a weight lifted off my shoulders, Very exciting indeed.
Got a spring in your step now.
I'm feeling it. Drew Sleazer wrote in and said, hey, friends, I know Colin has been lamenting the current state of Honey Bunches of Oats with almonds, but may I introduce you to a General Mills product that arguably has too many almonds? It's called Morning Summit, and this is the heartiest, most almond-laden product I have ever seen. Good to know, Drew. I appreciate it. I just like the way you wrote that, so I wanted to include that. Thought it was very snappy. It was well written. It was funny. I'll have to check that out. Thank you. I've just been eating almonds, 2-pound bags of almonds by hand.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just almonds?
Just almonds.
Not even like
So
mixed nuts?
Well, I make my own mixed nut with walnuts sometimes. So I put them in a bowl, just kind of mix them around.
So
yeah.
Colin, I looked up this morning Summit. On the box, they have a big red box at the top that says almonds are the first ingredient in all capital letters.
Yeah, let me check this out. Morning Summit. Yeah, let me look at this.
I've never heard of this in my life.
Me neither.
Oh, it's like maple.
Lightly sweetened maple berry blend cereal.
That's crazy. Almonds
There's
are the
whole
first
almonds in
ingredient.
there.
Made
It
with
looks like-
almonds, cereal flakes, pumpkin seeds. Come on, man. Dried
the pumpkin
cherries.
seeds.
What is this shit? Can't we just have almond? I didn't ask for. You know what? Forget it.
You want
Thanks,
a bowl
Reddy.
of almonds and milk?
Yeah, that's too. That's not what I'm looking for. Yeah,
Oh,
I appreciate it though. I mean, that is the great. That's where all the almonds went. Now we know.
Yeah.
They're like, we need it for this fucking almond summit or whatever the hell.
It's 310 calories.
Is like that's a lot, right?
That's not bad.
No,
not bad. Not bad at all.
David Wilson II wrote in and said, "Good day, sirs. I address Dustin here. As I write this submission, I'm sipping out of my coffee Folger's Colombian blend. I love the high-end coffee snob types of coffees too, but I drink Folgers as my daily morning fuel. Does this make me an uncultured coffee connoisseur because I'm a cheapskate? I find pleasure in just about any coffee, much like Henry Ford with his Model T, as long as it's black. Oh, do I need to refine my palate, or am I safe to sip with a clean conscience? Thanks, and be well." You have anything to say? It's to you.
I usually, you have a little lead in.
Yeah,
there,
you're right.
I'm
you're
ready.
right.
No, I'm ready to just go in. I'm
Yeah.
ready to go in on this. Now, here's the thing: is that I once was very, very coffee snobby, and I realized no one likes that guy, and
No.
I realized it was wrong of me, and I'm recovering. As in, I try to appreciate all coffee for what it is. I'm not always successful in that, right? But like if you're at a diner, as one of Colin's favorites, Eaton Park here in the local
Mhm.
Pittsburgh area,
Good shit.
coffee's not very good, but it tastes right in the context. This is important. Now, as far as Folgers, my argument is that there are much better options at a similar price point. And if this is something you're doing every day, you're drinking coffee every day, it's part of your routine, you should enjoy it. You should enjoy it to some extent. I understand budgetary reasons, but I highly recommend, like right now, I can't be drinking the single origin light roast every day. It's too expensive. So right now, drinking the Dunkin' Donuts at home. Make sure you get whole bean, get a grinder. And, I mentioned Tim Hortons is a good option, but Folgers, if you enjoy it, that's what's important. But if you're just coasting, I believe in you. You can do better.
Columbia House.
You deserve it. Columbia House. I can't remember the last time I've had that. My
That's
grandma,
the same
I
thing.
think,
That might
makes
even be a
Columbia
step
House.
backwards. Maxwell House. That's like all the same
Maxwell
stuff.
House. That's
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Is Maxwell's a Columbia House? No, that's not Columbia. Is there a Columbia
I don't think
coffee?
so.
The red can.
That's Folgers.
Oh, that's Folgers. Let me look. I'm gonna look.
I feel like I've really only anytime I have coffee outside of a diner, it's really just espresso. It's just shots of
Espresso's
espresso.
great.
I love espresso. Espresso is like my main unless I'm at a diner, in which case it's like normal diner coffee I think is entirely fine. I think the setting of the diner enhances the flavor of any coffee that you're drinking. Even if the coffee sucks, it's just like, oh, I'm at a diner. It's kind of like how like you're even if the pizza is kind of like underwhelming at a party, it's nice, or like when soup when you're sick hits like way better than like if you're just eating soup.
Chris, how about
just like
if it's 1 a.m. outside of a weird bar and you bought it from a guy?
That's
in a
different.
truck?
That's different.
That happened.
That was crazy. So when we were in Houston, we it was like 1 a.m. and there was this man with a what was it? What did it say? Time for pizza or whatever? Like on the van.
It was shady.
It was a shady white van that said pizza time, basically. And you walk up to it. I think somebody who's with us is trying to take a picture of it because it was so funny. And some man meanders out of the shadows like, "You want pizza?" and we just go like, "Yeah, I mean, I guess." And then he just opens what looks like a it felt like he opened like a casket and then like just pulled out this like pre-made
hearse.
pizza. Yeah, it was like a hearse. It was a pizza hearse.
Pizza hearse.
It was all the pizza that died that nobody wanted. And then he just like he reheats it, gives it to you in a bag, and then he goes and he charges you money, and then you leave. And I remember like opening the box and it was gray. I didn't touch that thing at all.
You were traveling the next day, which was a wise move.
Yeah.
I unfortunately I was very hungry at that moment. Let me tell you, not good. In fact, probably some of the worst pizza I've ever eaten. I wasn't drunk. Had a drink or two in me, very tired. And you know what? In that moment, this brings it all around, Chris. Yeah. Context.
Yeah, if you're
at
drunk,
that moment, outside of that weird speakeasy in Houston at 1 a.m, that great pizza.
Dude, if I'm drunk, I'm eating fries right out of the fridge, you know?
Yeah.
Totally. Cold, gross. Doesn't matter. You just need the sustenance.
Yeah. I ordered that night. There was a place that was open till 4 a.m., which I was like, yes, it's good to be back in a real city. And like even LA, you're struggling with that, but there's places like that, especially down by UCLA, and they would deliver to you all night. And so we got like just cheeseburgers and fries, and it was awesome. I think it was called Burger Slut, to be honest with you, something like that.
Oh, that sounds probably right.
Yeah, and it was fucking good. And it was one of those places where there's just not that many items on the menu, so it's just like, let's go.
Burger, so wait a minute. This is a place called, it's just called Burger Slut?
I think that was the name of it, like literally. And they had a thing called slut sauce on their burgers that you can get or whatever. But I think that's what it was. If you,
Bun Slut?
Bun Slut. That's what it is. Bun Slut. Yeah,
Bun Slut. Yeah,
is that like a real restaurant, or is it one of those ghost kitchens?
I was thinking that too. It might be like in the middle of the night sort of thing, but the burgers were really good and the fries were really good. So they have some sort of setup with a fryer and a flat top and stuff. But
it says dine in. They have
dine in
locations.
There's a place in LA called Egg Slut, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Lots of sluts out there.
So
ready to serve you
Tell
delicious
me about
food.
It. All right. All right, my friend. Sacred Symbols is sponsored by Babbel, the super effective and award-winning language learning app that can help teach you one of 14 global languages right now at babbel.com/sacred. So here's the rub, and I'm especially talking to you fellow Americans out there, although it's a lesson a global audience can no doubt understand as well. We need to be more worldly. We need to understand more about what's going on outside of our borders. We need to open our minds to fresh experiences. And a great way to do that is to learn a new language, something we mighty unilingual Americans in particular don't exactly excel at. Listen, I get it. I sat in those unimaginatively boring French classes for years, my friends, years. Middle school, high school, college, it was all nonsense. Studying for the next test, memorizing what you needed, and then forgetting it. Never building language skills practically. By actually using those skills. With Babbel, subscribers get access to a load of fun, bite-sized, and most importantly, sensical and sensible lessons that don't simply take the form of ancient textbooks and tired teachers. Instead, Babbel peppers you with brief 10-minute lessons that build a solid foundation, and with the addition of a plethora of games, videos, podcasts, stories, and even live classes, Babbel strives to teach language dynamically. This makes sense, of course, since their entire app has been constructed by more than 150 language experts from around the globe. And Babbel itself offers 14 language options, from Spanish and Russian to Portuguese and even English itself, if you're not a native speaker. Indeed, Babbel is a far cry from the way many of us learned second languages back in the day. I can immediately see the difference when I messed around with Babbel's French lessons, reigniting long dormant vocabulary and structure. But even if you're a total newcomer, that's almost better, because you have no bad lessons and poor memories to overcome and unlearn. Delay no further. It's all up from here, my friends. You're going to learn a second language, and you're going to do it with Babbel. Right now, get up to 55% off your subscription when you go to babbel.com/sacred. That's babbel.com/sacred. Again, that's babbel.com/sacred for up to 55% off your subscription. Babbel, language for life. Braden Summers wrote in. Said, hey team, we're just over a year away from Sacred 300, so I must ask, do you have any preliminary ideas on how to sell or what to do to celebrate? Take care, guys. I don't know, man. I'm going to have to do that scary thing at some point again of trying to figure out exactly when it is by counting out the calendar and then asking everyone to do it too so that I know I'm not wrong. So that we definitely have the right date. But I don't know. That's interesting. When I used to do Podcast Beyond 300 is probably the biggest event ever in that entire show's history. And that was really cool. So we'll have to do something for 300. I don't know what it's going to be though. It's a long time away, but we're going to have to start figuring that out.
Yeah.
In the next 6 months, I would say. Well, we probably have until we really need to execute on a plan.
Yeah. Human sacrifice.
That'd be sick.
Yeah.
I'd love that. What I would love, I saw a recent public freakout at like one of those Aztec or Mayan mount, like pyramids, those beautiful step pyramids in Mexico. And what we can do is we can go there and bring someone up and rip their heart out of their chest.
The idea of like a Waffle House tier fight at a pyramid is so sad. So
what actually happened. You want to know what happened? Is that a tourist climbed the pyramid, which you're not supposed to do. And people like gathered around the pyramid so that when the person came down, they were like throwing things at her and yelling at her because it's like supposed to be like, you're just not supposed to be going up those things. I understand the urge, the masculine urge to run up the Mayan pyramid. I totally get that. You know, you got to contain yourself.
Is it like highly illegal to do that?
It's probably illegal in terms of their antiquity laws, but I think it's just like a faux pas. Much like if you went beyond the rope of a museum, I don't think they're going to like throw you away forever, but you're not supposed to do that, you know?
Yeah. They're not going to like Kalima you or anything, but I don't know. I feel like it would be really difficult for me to resist the urge to climb a pyramid. It's like built for it. It's literally stairs if stairs were a building. Like what? Like how could you not climb it?
Right. I agree. And those things are so big. It's like, man, these guys must have been fucking jacked up. I'll tell you right now, you know, not jacked up. That jacked up would be bad. Jacked
up and
maybe they were both. I don't know. Jacking people off.
Yeah. Now, Colin, quick question about the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Do we select someone from the audience or do they volunteer? Because if we are selecting people, I have some ideas.
No, I want to volunteer. This is 2023. You know,
or like a raffle.
Just select people.
A raffle.
Oh,
the lottery.
Sacrificial raffle.
We should do it like the short story, The Lottery. Remember that? Where everyone has to like, they kill a person, I think, every year or something in their society. And it's like, it could be anyone. That was the story, right? Did you guys read that when you were kids?
No.
Yeah, that was like
I remember it. I don't remember much of it, though. I think
it was called The Lottery. And yeah, it was like how, kind of like the beginning of Hunger Games almost, but it was before that. You know, like they're, I love that shit. I love dystopia.
They didn't have ridiculous hair.
No. Dude, I love that shit though. I love the style of the Hunger Games. I thought that they did a really nice job of representing that weird shit that in what was it, Sector 1 and Sector 2, whatever they call it. Anyway, this isn't about the Hunger Games. Although shout out to the Hunger Games. Really good shit. Sacred 300? I don't know. Well, the thing is that if we ask for a tribute, we'll get one. Mm-hmm. So
that's true.
We have a little bit of time to figure this out and think about it. I don't know. What do we do? It'll probably about, so it'd be, I don't know. I hate to even try to do the math. It's going to be in April, I guess, of 2024. Let's go to the moon.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's blow up the moon.
I would love
Sacred
that.
300. We'll send a bunch of TNT to the moon, blow it up, and then the debris will spell out sacred symbols.
Yeah. And, as it's coming into the sky, as
the tides recede, and as our ecosystem crumbles around us, everybody will at least know what podcast to check out.
There's a good young adult book I read when I was staying with my mom for those few months when I first moved to Virginia. She just had it. I can't remember the name of it, but it's about it's actually pretty cool. It's about an event where the moon gets way closer to the Earth. Like it like gets twice as close to the Earth or something, and just that somehow, I have no idea how that happened, and that just fucks everything up. And
so Majora's Mask,
dude.
Yeah, kind of like Majora's Mask. 72 hours.
There's a movie called Another Earth. Have you heard of this, Colin?
It's
like a sci-fi movie where one day there's like a copy of Earth that's getting closer to our Earth, and eventually they make contact, and it's a mirror. Like there's another you on this other side of this other Earth. It's very interesting.
Awesome.
That's cool movie. That's so gross.
It's
horrible.
Sounds
pretty cool. Sounds like
that means every mistake you've ever made has been made twice.
Right.
Well, that's the question in the show or in the movie is like, there's another version of you out there, and something bad happens, and maybe you can contact this other side and see if they're living the same life you are, or maybe that person that died isn't dead on the other side.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Braden, thanks for writing, and I have no idea. I don't even know what we're going to do for episode 250, for God's sake. Greg Dawson wrote in and said, Colin Horatio Moriarty. Thought I'd try you with a middle name since you said you're without. Thank you. I don't know that I like Horatio, but that's fine. You've mentioned your love for Antiques Roadshow on a few episodes and shows now, but as far as I can recall, never elaborated. As someone who grew up in the days of one TV in the household, it felt like torture when my parents wanted to watch that show. Just wanted to know, is it the same BBC version that I know or some American bastardization? What do you like about the show? Do Chris and Dustin also partake? Well, I watch the British version sometimes, but we have an Americanized version that I'm going to tell you is just way better than the British version. And it's been going since 1997, I want to say. There's so many episodes. In fact, I just subscribed to PBS, their streaming service, so I can watch more of Antiques Roadshow. And no, I don't know. I love it. I love old things. I'm a history guy. I just like things that are, I don't even care about the pricing. I just like seeing old people's old relics. And there's always things where I'm like, damn, I wish I had that. This dude, I was watching one last night. This dude had a, like his great uncle or something died at Shiloh in the Civil War in 1862. And he has his sword and his rifle, or his sword and his Colt pistol that were from 1860, and a picture of him or whatever, and like letters. I'm like, this is fucking dope, dude. This is like the whole shebang. This dude died in 1862 in the war when the South was still kind of winning the war. And I don't know. So I like watching it. It's a little touchstone with history. I love the jewelry. You know, I have a little bit of a feminine side. Like I said, that's the whole Downton Abbey, Colin, right? I like the jewelry and the fine clothing and the furniture. And there's like a bunch of Tiffany stuff, and it's like glassware and art. It's good. I love it, man. I love the arts. So yeah, I love Antiques Roadshow. It's really, really fun to watch. I highly recommend it. And of course, if you've seen Grandma's Boy, which is a classic video game industry movie, you'll know that show is central to the whole premise of the show, because his grandma and her friends become addicted to it throughout the show. Like they become more and more addicted to Antiques Roadshow throughout the movie, rather. And which is so funny until like they like do not want to be disturbed while they're watching it. So yeah, shout out to Antiques Roadshow. Do you guys like the show at all? Have you seen it?
I feel like I've seen clips of it. Like there's one, I think I saw one where this guy like, yeah, I got this blanket in my basement, and it was some Native American blanket that was worth $20,000, maybe more than that. It was absurd. I guess that is the fun of the show, is seeing people had no idea that they had something that was worth an enormous amount of money. Now, my question is there the other side where someone's like, oh yeah, I got this, is worth a lot, and they're like, you don't have shit.
They don't show those often, but like what they do is there's probably, like, if you watch a show, there's probably like maybe 8 or 10 things that they show, and they'll spend like a 30 seconds to several minutes with each of them. And but then at the end, they let people, it's like Antiques Roadshow has kind of got like a community of people that are kind of in on it. And when they come to they call it the Roadshow because they come to your town, and it's like all of them, like all of the experts. So like whatever you've got. And so people try to go out there. And so at the end, they have a little thing where people come and say like, oh, I brought this thing and it was worth like less than the gas I paid to get here. Or like, I brought this thing thinking it was this and it's actually fake. Or and so it's cool. They like kind of self-deprecate as well, which is neat.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen a single, because it's never, I don't know, like I would like to see an episode of it where it goes like, oh, hey, here's you know what you've got here? This is JFK's skull fragment, you know, like, or just something outlandishly insane. But it's always just like, here's like here's a pistol that I don't even know Aaron Burr forgot about. And it's just
that'd be sick.
I guess
he's like, oh my God, I forgot my pistol when he and then Alexander Hamilton just shot him right in his fucking. It's not the way it went at all, actually. Alexander Hamilton was killed by Aaron
the
Burr.
opposite. Yeah, I don't know.
That's on the other Earth.
I do like Pawn. What's that one?
Pawn Stars.
Yeah. I don't watch it, but like there are clips that I see that make me laugh every time, because it's always like best I could do is like 12 cents.
Yeah. It's or like, some guy like has like Elvis's first guitar, and he's like, best I can do is $100, whatever. Yeah, that's a good one. I didn't like how there was another one called Hardcore Pawn. That was
that sucks.
And it took place. It was like in Detroit, and that one was interesting too because they had like a much bigger operation. But what I didn't like was that everyone was trying to sexualize the word pawn. It's like, can we just move on now?
Pawn Stars, I think, is like it's nebulous enough. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, it's like it's almost a double entendre, but it works by itself. But like Hardcore Pawn, come on. That's so.
It's awesome on one hand, but it's like
it's funny, but it's like one of those it's like it feels like a Rick and Morty like interdimensional cable show. You know what I mean? Where it's like this shouldn't be real. It's like that show MILF Island or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
Dude, did you know what it was
on?
actually about, though? Because I actually learned what it was actually about, that they bring their sons.
Yeah. So it's a bunch of hot moms. It's a bunch of hot moms, and then they think they're going on this like romantic retreat, and it's just all of their sons. And I just don't know what's going on. Like, presumably they're trying to get these boys to fuck other people's moms, which is like
exactly
bizarre. Which is just bizarre. I don't know what's going on.
While their mom's around. This is what I when I saw that, I turned to Mike and I was literally like, this is the most Oedipin thing I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, this is literally this is Freud's dream and nightmare at the same time. Like, the culmination of all his theories is MILF Island. And that's just the long and the short of it. Yeah.
I stopped being super concerned with this because like I went to school for film for a little bit, and I had a screenwriting teacher who wrote for a lot of these shows. And once I learned that was even a thing, I was like, oh, okay, well, but it's still an insane premise that I can't believe is even remotely real. Oh well. Yep.
Let's move on.
Yeah,
I think
please.
it's time to get out of here.
Yeah,
that's the show. That's all it is. Shout out to Antiques Roadshow. Check it out. PBS. Shout out to PBS. Love PBS. We should give more money to PBS even, I think, in the arts and entertainment and all of that stuff as a society. Much cheaper and can be much more effective than a bomb.
Get another season of Arthur going.
Dude, I used to love Arthur.
Dude,
I was way too old to watch Arthur. Way too old. I mean, I was in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. I was watching Arthur after school.
Did you see the series finale of Arthur where it turns out to all be a comic book or something?
Is that true? I didn't know that.
So I think it was like there's some implication that everything that you saw was like Arthur became like some like illustrator or something.
It's like some Newhart shit. Like where they're like, this is I didn't know that. You know why I think I realized as I get older why I was into Arthur when I was into it, which is like it brought me this like childlike comfort of a nuclear family when my parents got divorced. And I think it just but I happen to be just too old for it, you know. And I wasn't really like earnestly watching it being like, yes, DWs. I just was like, I was entertained with it. There was something very comfortable. About it.
It's a comfortable show.
And I really liked it, you know? Yeah.
It's a comfortable show. Yeah. But the series finale is really just bizarre. Especially because live action Steven Crowder shows up. And it's just like very, very off-putting.
That's incredible. By the way, did you see all that stuff with Steven Crowder where he got $40 or $50 million offer from Daily Wire and then just like went public with it and ruined? I don't know what that was all about. I was like, what? They just offered you $50 million? Like I would have been like, yes.
Yeah, it's
like they literally would have been sliding the paper over. I would have been signing it as they were sliding the paper over.
Yeah, especially because it's just doing what he's doing anyway. Like I don't see the. I don't know. That was a whole thing.
Yeah, his whole shtick. I'm not into him really. I actually was invited to go on his show when I left Kind of Funny, but I just couldn't work it out schedule wise. But it's a little too aggressive for me, and a little too alienating. I think is actually a good word. All right, let's see here. That's it. I wanted to recommend this one article before we get into things. I don't often recommend pieces here, but on IGN. My old stomping grounds, Ezra Krabbe. I think that's the name. It's ESRA KRABBE. I've never heard of this person, but wrote a great piece about Japanese video games. And it's called Final Fantasy and Castlevania Creators Discuss the Rise, Decline, and Revival of Japanese Video Games. And he interviewed Hironobu Sakaguchi, who of course is, or Sakaguchi rather, who of course is one of the creators of Dragon Quest. And then my boy Koji Igarashi, who was the producer of Castlevania for many years, starting with Symphony of the Night. Although I think he worked on Rondo of Blood as well. It's prequel. And it's just a really interesting look into what they think about the interpretation of Japanese games over time and why they think Japanese games went from the standard to the butt of the joke and now are fighting again with Western games. And it comes from two dudes who know a thing or two about it. And one of the things I liked about this piece, and it's hidden in there and no one's pulled it out as a story, and I don't think it's very notable, but Igarashi basically says, like, I'm going to make the games that I make, like that I'm good at making. And I was like, yes, we're just going to get 2D or 2.5D if that's what's necessary, Metroidvania games from Koji Igarashi until the day he dies. And I'll tell you a little funny story about Koji. I might have said this in the past, but he came to my apartment when I was doing Kind of Funny for an interview, and we bought him a burrito. And you don't. What's the most noobish thing you can do with a burrito? You pull all the aluminum foil off of it, right? I watched a friend of mine come from Long Island and do that. Just like pull it. I'm like, dude, that's not how you eat a burrito. You have to do it. Roll it as you go. And he was about to do that. And of course, it's not a hipster thing. If you take the aluminum foil off the burrito, then the burrito falls apart. So it's important that you don't do that. And he doesn't speak English, not even a word of English. So it's not like Keiji Inafune, when I would talk to him, he understands what you're saying. He's just not confident enough to speak back. So I would actually talk directly to him, and then he would talk through a Japanese interpreter back to me. And so it wasn't like that. So anyway, he was unwrapping his burrito, and I was like, no, like kind of like that. And he had no idea why I was saying that, and it like shocked him. And like that, the translator had to be like, oh yeah, like explain everything. And I always remember it because I was like, I felt like such an asshole because there was like that, like in the moment, I think I made him feel like a dummy or something like that. I'll always remember that. That's my memory of Koji Igarashi.
Dang.
Okay, so check out that article by Ezra Crabb. Final Fantasy and Castlevania creator discuss the rise, decline, and revival of Japanese video games over at IGN if you would like. But let's get into some news here. And this news actually broke the morning that we are recording, and I'm very pleased to see it. BAFTA. So for people that don't know what BAFTA is, this is the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, a very world-renowned organization celebrating, supporting, and buttressing the arts. And they give away fellowships. So people basically join as honorary lifetime members of BAFTA. And they are offering the BAFTA Games Fellowship to none other than Shuhei Yoshida. And they write, Shuhei Yoshida, head of Sony Interactive Entertainment's Independent Developer Initiative and pioneer of the games industry, will be awarded the prestigious fellowship of the BAFTA Game Awards on March 30th. The award, which recognizes outstanding contributions to games, is the highest accolade bestowed by BAFTA to those who have driven positive change in the screen arts. In 1993, Yoshida joined the PlayStation project. And so that was even before it launched, obviously, promoting innovative game design and role of independent developers, later becoming the president of Sony Interactive Worldwide Studios. And so he'll probably give an acceptance speech. I'll be interested to see what he has to say there. And I just wanted to let everyone know like how big of a deal this is. Here's some people that have won BAFTA or have BAFTA fellowships. Okay. So just a few names: Jacques Cousteau, Charlie Chaplin, David Attenborough and his friend and his brother rather, Steven Spielberg, Alec Guinness, Maggie Smith, Woody Allen, Sean Connery, Michael Caine, Stanley Kubrick, Warren Beatty. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And of course, there are people from games. So here are the people from, let me organize this here. There we go. So here are the people that have gotten them from games: Peter Molyneux, Shigeru Miyamoto, Nolan Bushnell, Will Wright, Gabe Newell, Rockstar as the studio, probably the biggest British team ever at Rockstar North, David Braben, John Carmack, Tim Schafer. And there's someone missing here because or some of these must not be.
Say, what about Dreams?
Yeah, I was going to say Siobhan Reddy is also one of them, so that she's not on this list for some reason. So that's huge, and many congratulations to him. Of course, with Legend of Dragoon, the PS1 game Legend of Dragoon, just getting released on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. It's a celebration of Shuhei Yoshida even on the PSN right now, as he was the producer of that game. So congratulations to you, Shuhei. I know you listen.
Yeah. He's such a nice guy. Like, genuinely. I met him one time at PlayStation Experience, and it was just as a total fan interaction, but he had so much grace and humility that I've not forgotten that. When you meet people like that, it's cool. And so he comes off as very genuine. I'm very happy for him.
He is genuine. He's a sweet guy. And he brought me, I told you that he brought me to dinner once in Tokyo at the place where the Kill Bill, that famous Kill Bill restaurant scene took place.
Oh, really?
And, yeah. And we ate there, he and I. Yeah, that was pretty cool. And
That's
he
awesome.
gave me, I've definitely said this before, but he gave me this Japanese printout, was like a map and some Japanese text on it to just hand to the taxi driver. He's like, just give them this when you get into the taxi. And then they just delivered me there and pointed, and I like went up and there it was. It was pretty cool. So yeah, he's a really nice guy. I've had some really interesting conversations with him, and he's a family man, which I respect, which is very, very cool. Okay. So last week we got to talk a little bit about Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. Bloomberg's reporting that it was delayed out of its May release date, which was itself a delayed release date. And so Video Games Chronicle writes, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League could be delayed to 2024, it's claimed. So that's a substantial delay. So they reiterate that the original source was Bloomberg, but that typically reliable reporter Jeff Grubb said on Giant Bomb that the game might not even come out until 2024 now. And I'm wanting to revisit this to kind of, we talked about it on the fly, I think last week, as I remember. We didn't really have much time to marinate on it. So now that we've marinated on it more, I wanted to just touch back on this to see how we feel about it and what do we think about such a substantial delay, if true, and what we think that might mean. So Chris, let's go to you first. What do you think about, what are your thoughts now a week out from the news of the Suicide Squad delay, and what do you think that it might be a substantial delay, indicating that they're going to try to go back and maybe really rework some stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to see this as them going back to the drawing board in some way, and kind of like, hey, we're gonna go ahead and we're going to respond to feedback in a real meaningful way, where, you know, we understand this is certain aspects are not what people expect or what people want. We're going to go back and fix it. It's hard for me to believe that that's the case, because, I mean, clearly they must know. Like, it couldn't have surprised them that much that this type of game isn't exactly what people were looking for. Like, I think even people on the development staff, I have to imagine they even have just basic play testers probably saying something similar. Like, I don't know if this is the wake up call or the surprise that people anticipate that it is. I would like that to be the case. It would be great for Suicide Squad to kind of come back with a revamp. I think they know on some level that it's your first impression is very, very important. I think they see, things going on in the greater industry. I mean, I think of Halo constantly when I think about like first impressions and how they can really doom a product, even if it's by all intents and purposes good. So I think maybe they could be going back. They might be reworking some things, but ultimately the game is, what it's going to be at this point. Like, they're not going to fundamentally shift things. I do think maybe the economy could use a solid rework. I do think maybe leveling could be drastically changed, and maybe that'll do a lot of saving, but that doesn't change the fact that the game was designed with a lot of those elements in mind. And so I wonder how this new retrofitted version of this game is going to come across after all of that retrofitting is done. Because it's very possible that it kind of messes the whole thing up. But we don't know that. That's entirely speculative. It would be nice, though, to see them respond to feedback in such a way that they actually do kind of move backwards on some of the decisions that people are clearly sick of. I mean, it reeks of Avengers. Not as far as a quality bar goes, but as far as like some of the systems in place where they just really shouldn't be. Like, there's no reason why these games need to be designed in this way.
Yeah, very well said. Dustin, what do you think?
Yeah, well, if you're one of the increasingly rare people that haven't been blocked by Jason Schreier yet, what's interesting is that he kind of referenced that a delay like this is mainly for polish. And yeah, I think his reporting was pushing more that it would be this year, just later. A delay, I don't know. It's such weird conflicting information in that if it is for polish, then I can't imagine it being out of this year. But at the same time, like you guys are saying, it's kind of too late to revamp things. So maybe a great deal of polish is needed, which is kind of weird that there was kind of locked in and starting the marketing for this and then decided to do that afterwards. But I'm really unsure what to think. I think there's also some, and I think we talked about this last week, but the idea of simply delaying to get out of a really busy season as well, where you have Diablo, stuff like that, Final Fantasy, because the original release date was
May 24, I want to say.
May, yeah. So, oh yeah, that's pretty close to Zelda also. So I think it makes sense that if you already have the hardcore populace having a negative viewpoint of a game, push it out, and then maybe you get a slight second chance to try to win people over. But I don't know. Like I said, it feels conflicting.
It's funny because I'm at the wiki page for it, and it's May 26th, but it's still listed as that. Has WB not acknowledged this at all? I guess
think
I'm not.
you're
I
right.
guess I actually didn't maybe take that into account that they have not even acknowledged the delay. Yeah, it says no. I'm in the talks page. It says any claims of delay by Bloomberg or anyone else needs to be verified and then confirmed by WB or Rocksteady themselves. There's still the possibility the game would come on May 26th. I mean, I doubt that that's true, but I understand why they haven't changed it yet. But it just, I think you guys have already said this. But I don't know what you can do, and there is a sunk cost fallacy to continuing to work on this game. I think at some point, I don't really. I mean, Jason would know, but I don't really buy the idea that this is for polish. Maybe that's what he's being told. I agree with you, Dustin, that you don't hold a game for potentially a full year to polish it 2 months before it was supposed to come out. It will be generous and say 2.5 months. I mean, as I said last week, we're in the situation where the game could potentially have been going gold soon. So this is not a, I don't think so. I just don't think this is one of those we need 6 weeks kind of thing. And I'm not saying that that's what Jason's necessarily insinuating, but this does seem like they want to try to, they have to bring it back in and try to figure out what they can change. I just don't know what they can change. And degrading, part of me almost feels like I would have respected a lot more than being like, this is the game. And why don't you just give it a chance and see what it is? Instead, I think they did the thing that might be smart, but I don't know that it necessarily is, which is that they're going to try to pigeonhole or try to rather wedge this game into another box where it doesn't belong. And you can't do anything about the gameplay at this point. There's just nothing to be done about that. As was said, you can mess around with mechanics, maybe marginally, but really what you're messing around with is design and systems, economies, upgrades. I don't know what you're going to do. I just don't know what they're going to do. My whole thing was I'd be like, just get this game out. If you're wasting your time. I still also think the game's going to sell well. I know that it got like heavily downvoted and all this stuff on YouTube, but I still think the game
is going to sell well.
Yeah, it'll still sell millions of copies.
It's like whenever Call of Duty gets like a 50% dislike on something, it's like you're going to buy it. It doesn't really matter.
I will say that this dislike ratio is more like 20-1 for dislikes, but it's still. But I just think that's people speaking out. But I don't. It's like I said with Gotham Knights, that game still sold pretty well, even though it didn't even do very well. No one really wanted it or talked about it when making fun of it. It's a Gotham Knights. I mean, a game called Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League. I would imagine that that's worth millions of copies itself, as long as it's not a brick. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I just don't understand how they're going to change it. And I appreciate the fickleness in terms of we want to listen to the audience. We got to deliver a product for the market. At the same time, I don't appreciate the fickleness. You developed this for years in secret, and no one said anything until you heard from the audience that they didn't like it. Like, what is wrong with you? If this is the game that believe in it, then do it.
That's the big part of it for me. It's like this can't be a surprise that people aren't loving this stuff. Like it can't be that it just dawned on them like, oh, gear score isn't something that people want in their superhero game. Crazy. Like that can't be a surprise. So I don't know. I
could have seen this being. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just think just part of me just feels like it's impossible that they wouldn't have at least understood that and did what they did anyway.
Totally. I just, these games are too focus tested and consultants are all over them and everything. I think this game reeks of a game that would have looked really good on paper in 2016 or 2017 with a 2020 or 2021 release date. But it's too late. And it was too long in the hopper. It's a great example of this merge of games becoming too expensive, too long to make. By the time you get them out, you're not even hitting the beats that you wanted to hit anymore. I mean, the meltdown of this game in some way, at least optically, is a sign of things to come, I think. And if WB, a pretty moneyed organization in publishing, with Rocksteady, a very renowned studio, although they lost their two heads recently, if they're scared, then I imagine a lot of people are scared. I imagine Embracer Group's especially scared. The guys with less cachet, more to ride on every product and all the rest. Like WB can take this aside and be like, well, Hogwarts Legacy is outselling Elden Ring basically, which is crazy. So we're good. And so we'll put this game back in the oven, but I just don't think they can save it from what it's going to be ultimately, from what it's going to be.
I do feel like that maybe they can tweak it just enough, because I do feel like a lot of the complaints with these games aren't even really in the gameplay. I do think a lot of it is in just the feeling of, oh, why is there gear score? Like, why is there this like weird drip feed of XP leading to like a really like meager progression system that doesn't really like. I feel like a lot of it really is the dressing or like the frosting on the cake. That's the problem. I think the cake's probably fine. I think the game probably is really fun to play. But imagine Spider-Man. Imagine Insomniac Spider-Man with gear score. Even if it played exactly the same, it would be so much worse. Like it would be so irritating to play Spider-Man with gear score. Like, oh, I have to equip the I don't know, the amazing Bagman suit for +5 vitality or whatever. And that's man, it's frustrating because it's such a simple solution as to just don't do that. The reason why Spider-Man is so successful isn't just because it's Spider-Man, it's because it's simple and fun and damn good. And if you could just like translate whatever you're making with Suicide Squad into something that's a little bit more simple, a little bit less convoluted, then I think that it might do well for them. Because yeah, Gotham Knights sold a lot, but I didn't buy it, and I totally would have if it just wasn't exactly what it was. If it was just slightly different, I probably would have given it a shot. Also, if it was just performed better.
Yeah, exactly. There's still no 60 frames patch for it, I don't think.
That's crazy.
The thing I think here, though, that I'm curious about moving out of this topic is, what do we glean from it from a wider angle? Is this a sign that people were very specifically upset that Rocksteady wasn't making an Arkham-style game? That's one thing. Or is it people upset that this game is Fortnite and they don't want more of that? And I actually don't know. It's probably some melding of the two, but I think it's definitely heightened and magnified by the idea that people are like, we've been waiting since 2015 for a new game from you, and this is what you're giving us. And that seems to be most of it. Well, we just had a interruption there with our recording, so I have no idea what I was even saying. But nonetheless, Suicide Squad, date unknown, but still officially, I guess, May 26th until we hear more. By the way, what's going on with my hair here? I don't know. I hate
poof.
It's just a little poof. Okay. I wanted to talk quickly about this. GamesIndustry.biz reports that Square Enix's recent financial statements and I guess their various commentary from financial financial calls indicates that Forspoken has undersold. And they say, quote, and this comes from Yosuke Matsuda, who is the company president, although he won't be for very much longer. He says, quote, review of Forspoken, and by the way, I should go back and say, not because of this, but because he's already agreed to step down. Quote, reviews of Forspoken, which we released on January 24th, have been challenging. However, the game has also received positive feedback on its action features, including its parkour and combat capabilities, so it has yielded results that will lead to improvement of our development capabilities of other games in the future. And again, they referred to it in their write-up as lackluster. Forspoken sales lackluster. So this isn't a huge surprise, but Dustin, I wanted to ask you, and we can go around the horn here and talk a little bit about this. What do you think about this? We haven't played the game yet. I've actually been pretty interested in it. I think I am going to play it at some point. I watched a little bit more of it. There's a guy I follow on Twitter who posted some videos. I was like, this looks pretty fun. The price is right if I have time, and if I can just get past all the campiness and weirdness about it. But I really feel like Forspoken's failure is one thing, but I don't understand why Square Enix insists on releasing all of their games at one time. And I feel like this is something that happened last fall, because they noted that not only Forspoken undersold, but other games undersold too. And it's like, of course they did. You released them all on top of each other. Diofield Chronicle was released on top of Tactics Ogre, which was released on top of Final Fantasy Crisis Core, which was released on top of Forspoken. It's like, why are you releasing your games like this? Why are you doing this? It doesn't make any sense. And so, yeah, of course, everything's going to undersell as opposed to you just maybe focusing on one or two great products at a time. It's disappointing to see that. So I'm not surprised about Forspoken, but I am also surprised that they're surprised that they can't release games like this.
Right. Well, I think that that's definitely part of it, but I think that in a lot of ways, the writing was on the wall with this game. I think that there was some miscalculations in how they should make this game as far as having American writers and very intentionally trying to go with a very, I guess we'll call it pop culture focused style of writing that simply did not work for them. And so I think that their best hope would have been that before, when the game was already tainted before it came out, that it reviewed well and people said, it's a little cringy, but it's so worth it. And that's not what happened. And I think, too, that I don't know. I'm trying to remember where I heard this, so maybe I'm totally wrong. But it is known that Square Enix puts really high expectations on their games regularly. Sometimes, at least in my opinion, unrealistic. But I wonder if they were expecting this to be, or hoping for it to be, like a new pillar alongside Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy or something like that. And to me, it's just like, that's a lot of pressure to put on this game. And I think it's clear now that we're out of the fallout from release that Forspoken is not necessarily a bad game or a horrible game. But if you go in, it has some redeemable qualities. So yeah, I think I don't know. I don't think that I'm, even at a lower price point, I just don't really think I'm going to enjoy this game. So I think I'm out. And I think that's how a lot of people feel, is that I don't know, this game just does not speak to them. It doesn't speak to people that like Western games. It doesn't really speak to a lot of people that like Japanese games. It just, I don't know. Maybe that's the issue. It just doesn't appeal to a lot of people with the way it presented itself.
I do want to underline, though, why I think that Forspoken its performance is magnified because of how important it was that it did well, because the games weren't selling around it. I want to put this is unbelievable. I want to just tell everyone this. Since beginning September 13th of 2022, this is what Square Enix released. Okay. They released that that second Voice of Cards game on September 13th. The same day they released Various Day Life. September 22nd, the Dialfield Chronicle. September 29th, Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, and Valkyrie Elysium. October 6th, Nier Automata comes to Switch. October 13th, Triangle Strategy goes to PC. October 27th, Star Ocean: The Divine Force. November 4th, Harvestella. November 11th, Tactics Ogre Reborn. November 30th, Front Mission on Switch. December 1st, Romancing Saga. December 9th, Dragon Quest Treasures on Switch. December 13th, Final Fantasy Crisis Core. January 24th, Forspoken. February 16th, Theater Rhythm, Final Bar Line. February 24th, Octopath Traveler. You can't release that many games to an audience that does not have the time to play them. What do they not understand? That the commonality between those games is the same consumer. So that by the time they get to Forspoken, they're like, what do you think is going on here?
Yeah.
Where do you think I gave up on Tactics Ogre, not because it was bad. I loved it. It's because I wanted to play Crisis Core the next month, and I was like, well, I'm going to go play Crisis Core now. You've completely interrupted me. And I'm the person who buys more than one of these games. I mean, these are games. Dialfield Chronicle is supposed to be awful or not very good. Various Day Life is, I don't care about that game. But Valkyrie Elysium, Star Ocean, Tactics Ogre, Romancing Saga, Crisis Core, and Forspoken, and Octopath are all Colin games. But how do you expect me to play them? This, Chris, I think, is the essence of Square Enix's problems. In other words, it's not that Forspoken didn't sell well alone. It's that Forspoken needed to sell better because all of these games came out and went like a fart. And that sucks, especially because some of them are really good. I don't know why they did this to themselves. It's just so obvious. Why aren't more people talking about this? Why do they? And what's so crazy, Chris, this is the craziest part, is that there are only 2 other games that even have release dates from Square Enix right now, meaning that they could have spread all of these out. There was no reason for them to wedge them all in like that, except because they wanted to get it in before the financial year was out, March 31st. Because the only Square Enix games that have dates now, Front Mission 2, June 12th, Nintendo Switch, the remake. And then Final Fantasy 16, which is June 22nd. 10 days later. Okay, guys.
It is a confusing strategy. And it's also just confusing just because it doesn't really take a business-minded person to see that that's not a smart way to do business. Like, I'm the furthest from a business-minded person in the world, and even I'm just like, you can't. It reminds me a little bit of what EA did with Titanfall. And they just put, why would you release this? Why would you release this shooter not only so close to a competitor shooter, but also your other competitor shooter to that competitor? It's insane. There's only so much bandwidth that any given player has, especially if these games appeal to the same types of player, especially for these specific Japanese games that take a long time, that are like really, really long. I mean, it's a confusing strategy, and I don't know what they were expecting. It's a little shocking that they are so that this seems to have caught them off guard because it just seems so predictable and obvious. I don't necessarily think that that's why Forspoken sold less, but I do think it put a lot more, obviously, like you've said it already, it put a lot more importance on Forspoken to do well. But I do think Forspoken is just one of those things where it's just like, this was not, the writing was on the wall, like Dustin said, where it's just like, this looked rough from the get-go.
Well,
actually, more than the get-go, actually. I feel like it actually got worse the more we saw of it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I was gonna say, similar to Suicide Squad, there was just nothing you can really do about Forspoken. Once people are like, "Oh no," it's like, "Well, this is it." I mean, the only difference is that they just did it anyway. They just went with it, which maybe wasn't the right choice. But I don't know, Dustin, if you have anything you want to say wrapping this up. I just think it's crazy that you would, in 100 days, release the Dialfield Chronicles, Valkyrie Profile, Lenneth, Valkyrie Elysium, Star Ocean, The Divine Force, Tactics Ogre Reborn, Romancing Saga, Crisis Core, Octopath. It's like, what? Who's managing this?
Mm-hmm. Well, we brought up the question. When this was happening, big question is Square Enix dumping these games for one reason or another? Getting them all. I mean, that seems kind of weird, thinking that it's just because there's something else going on in the background. It doesn't mean you want to send games out to die. But we do see Square Enix behaving and acting in a way that is not normal. So I don't know. There's rumors about acquisitions and stuff like that. That's really died down. But I don't know. And there's the whole aspect too about them not having any games coming out on Xbox anymore.
Yeah,
I think that's still true.
That is true. I don't think they have any announced games on Xbox right now. It's just strange. And then you're seeing like anecdotal evidence that Octopath might be underselling and all of the rest. And it's like, guys, if you already asked those people to give you told them to buy Tactics Ogre or Romancing Saga or Crisis Core or Star Ocean. It's like, so yeah, some people aren't going to show up to buy this game. What do you want? You're Square Enix. You're not fucking EA with all these sports games or something like that. You got to be careful. And I just think that they really shot themselves in the foot. So we'll see how this all pans out, but no surprise there about Forspoken for sure. Yeah, I'm going to skip that actually. Okay. Dustin, I was interested. Did you see this thing about this game, Bleak Faith, and this stuff about them using animations from Elden Ring?
Yeah, I read this article that you sent with it, which, by the way, I don't normally change the document at all, but you had written Bleak Faith Forspoken there, which one of the tweets referencing this game called it
Forsaken.
It's Forspoken. Yeah,
you're right.
So it was funny just because that it was written there, and then also in a tweet where someone kind of exposed this happening. To my understanding is that these guys had Elden Ring / whatever From Software animations in their game, and somebody lined them up and clearly was showing that they were pretty much the exact same animations. And here's the interesting update from this gamesindustry.biz article, because they initially vehemently denied it, but then they gave further details and said that, first of all, only 10% of the game uses Epic Marketplace assets. And apparently they bought these animations on the Epic Game Store asset, or not the Epic Game Store, the Epic Unreal Engine Marketplace, where you can go and buy assets, which only 10% of your game uses assets. And yet they showed numerous essential animations that you bought. That seems kind of like more than 10%. That seems like a pretty significant amount of character of your game that you purchased. And that's fine if that's what you're going to do, but it just seems like a weird workaround. They promised that they're going to be more mindful of, and they said they're not happy with how Epic has responded, and that they're going to replace the assets. So they're kind of saying it wasn't their fault, but who knows?
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty important point, because the studio noted that, and the studio is Archangel Studio for people that want to look into them. They do make a good point that it says, having raised the issue with Epic Games, and this is from GamesIndustry.biz, Archangel Studio said it received the following response, quote, "Pursuant to the marketplace distribution agreement, each marketplace seller represents and warrants to Epic that they have appropriate rights to upload their content. As with any store that hosts third-party content, however, Epic is not in a position to independently verify such rights, and Epic makes no such guarantee to purchasers of the content," end quote. And so Archangel itself said that that's not satisfactory, and said, quote, Certainly, this has been a huge lesson for us and hopefully other indie creators out there too, that assets on these storefronts seemingly cannot be purchased in good faith. End quote. This is a big deal. I think that this is exposing something really fundamentally flawed with Epic's entire notion of, in this case, having Unreal assets available to purchase. If you can't be the guarantor that they're good, then this is what happens. I don't think it's there. If they're telling the truth, regardless of if they use more assets than 10% or whatever, I don't really even give a shit. If they got these assets straight up and they were sold to them on the Epic storefront for assets as something unique and they got it that way, then how the hell were they supposed to know that? That's strange. That's very libertarian in a way that I'm surprised would be cool with anyone using it. Well, where it's very, go ahead.
I'm just saying, for other indie developers, I wouldn't buy anything from this store now, because you might be buying something that can get you in legal hot water and you might not have any idea. And Epic's kind of saying, well, it's not our fault.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you just completely ruined the integrity of your entire storefront.
I agree. And I'm sure in their user agreement, they're indemnified from all of this. I guarantee it. But it's a strange tactic to say, like, they, pursuant to the marketplace distribution agreement, they represent a certain thing and it wasn't true. And then they shrug their shoulders. It's like, well, what are you going to do about it? Are you going after them, or is there going to be some sort of restitution? Are you removing them from the storefront? It just seems very hands off, and I don't like that. And I feel like people are positioning this story where I've seen it as kind of making fun of this studio, and I get it, but they're right that if what they're saying is true, and I don't see why it wouldn't be, then there can't be any purchases in good faith in these storefronts. And this is a big deal. This is a total tragedy waiting to happen to a game much more important than, what is this, Bleak Faith. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to add, Chris?
No, I feel like you guys covered it.
Okay.
I feel like I will say this. It is crazy to me that, and I guess you said it too when you talked about how libertarian it is, just like Epic is so big that something like this happening is at all is kind of astounding. And I don't understand how it's possible. What the hell is going on? There are people in my house. Okay.
Just people.
That's
Who
cool.
knows?
Are they like changing a filter or something?
It just sounds like friends who have a key.
Oh, okay.
That's
okay,
what
cool.
it sounds like.
So yeah, I feel like this is something worth keeping an eye on. I feel like that's pretty shitty. There's another PC network, as it were, Steam, that is a very libertarian place. But the reality is that it's libertarian to the extent that it guarantees your money. They'll give you refunds for all sorts of different reasons. They give you 2-hour buy-ins. And most importantly, there's no reputational harm from buying something on Steam, because it can't be used in parlay in a bigger product or whatever. So I just think Epic needs to do a better job. And I hope that people call for them to do so. Finally, I just wanted to call this up. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Stalker. So the second Stalker game is finally coming out. Or it's not this. Let me see here. I think it has a release date. Not Heart of Chernobyl. Yeah, this is the one. Heart of Chernobyl from GSC Game World, which is a Ukrainian developer, although they work elsewhere in Europe now. They basically just released a little statement saying that one of their employees' accounts has been hacked, and a bunch of data and information, animation, art, etc., assets have been stolen, and that this is apparently a community from a Russian social network that's attempting to blackmail them, and they're leaking it and all of that. So they just put this out there. I don't think there's anything really to say about it, but I just wanted to note that there are, if you're interested in this game, Stalker 2, it will eventually come to PlayStation 5, but it's only announced for PC and Xbox right now. You might want to be careful because there are spoilers about, and it still has a nebulous 2023 release date, I think. Okay, let's get into what we're playing. Chris, first with you, you're not playing anything right now because you're busy training, correct?
Yeah, basically. Like everything's ramping up crazy. So like I'm doing basically like 2 to 3 times a day. And like every other day, and then every other day in between that is like just like running, and I'm winded. So I've just been watching a lot of movies and stuff, catching up on stuff.
Cool.
Everything Everywhere, by the way, is great.
What is it?
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah,
it's that movie that swept the Oscars.
Yeah, that one game or picture of the show or picture of the year, right? Whatever.
Yeah. So that's really good. But I haven't really had the time or the the bandwidth to sit and participate in active entertainment at all. And that's probably going to be the case for like the next few weeks, to be honest. But you know, we'll see.
Okay.
I've been doing like maybe like 10 minutes here and there on Destiny, but that's nothing.
Dustin, let's talk about what you're playing.
Sure. So I've moved over to Metroid Prime Remastered.
Cool.
And I've never played this game before. So this was exciting to dive in because I know a lot of people really love this game, love this series, and it's been fun seeing what it's all about. I gotta say, pretty impressive work from Retro Studio on the quality of this remaster. I would say I'm not saying it's the best looking game I've ever seen, but it's certainly a very impressive looking Switch game. It does not look like an up-res GameCube game. It really looks like they did a lot of hard work in order to bring it up to speed. I gotta say, I think that I'm enjoying it a lot. The more I play it, the more I enjoy it. But I think it's as good as some people think. I saw that IGN gave it a 10 and some other places gave it really, really high scores. And sure, yeah, like I said, the quality of the remasters is very good, but it's good. I'm enjoying it. I gotta say, the number one thing I hate, and this caused me to think deep within, because the thing that is killing me in this game is that if you die, it's old school that you go back to your most recent save. There is no checkpoint system in this game. And this has really, really frustrated me, where there's times where I've unlocked a new ability, I've maybe fought a boss, and there's been no save point, and I'm maybe heading to the next one, and I die. And I got to do that all again. And I understand that some Souls games are like that, and for some reason, it doesn't bother me in that sense. And I guess the later Souls games have a lot more checkpoints or save points, whatever. But I don't know. It's one of those old school sensibilities that I'm glad we left behind, and I'm just annoyed in this game in particular. But on the PlayStation side, I've still been playing lots of PlayStation VR 2. The two games I want to talk about this week are GT7 and Pavlov. So I have a long story about how I ended up renting a wheel, and then I found out someone was willing to sell me one for a really good price. And so the long story short is I have a Logitech G29 racing wheel now. Let me tell you, I am addicted. I think it is so cool. It is so fun. When the first race that I did with the wheel, I initially had this sinking feeling because I was so bad at it, and it was so frustrating that I thought, oh no, I can't. I hate this. I can't do it. But I stuck to it, and it's really added a whole new dimension to the game. And it really, if you're a racing fan and you already loved GT7, this is it's definitely, I feel like, essential. If you have PSVR too, the investment in the wheel, I think, is absolutely something that just takes it to a new level. To the point where, for me, even, I've started to invest further in that. I used to play it on the most basic mode with an automatic, and I've switched to manual and like really started to dial in, like feel like how to go around corners and stuff like that. And I feel like I'm a racing sim fan now through and through. I want to play through all of this game. I want to totally do. There's like guidebook I can't remember. You go to this coffee shop and they give you different missions and stuff like that. I want to totally beat that, and I'm super into it. I'm really shocked by it, and it just, like I said, the wheel brings a different level that I truly couldn't expect. Last thing, Pavlov. This game is shockingly popular on PlayStation VR 2. In fact, we got the sales data that we talked about for Sacred Sales Saga. I want to say this was like number 2 on the sales chart, Pavlov. This is a game that's already been out on other VR headsets, but obviously it kind of has a new life right now because of being out on PSVR 2. And it is kind of, it's a first-person shooter, Call of Duty military-style shooter in VR. And it's really cool and also very frustrating to me at the same time, where it's all realistic weapon reloading. You've got to take the clip out, put a new clip in, you got to, cock it back, stuff like that. sort of like Resident Evil, but a little more advanced than that. The thing that's really bothering me is that it's inconsistent in how you do certain things. So the big example for me is that you can use the grip button on the controller to take your clip out. But if you want to get a new clip, as far as I can understand, you have to use the trigger button to grab it instead, which makes no sense to me at all, that you would have to use a different button to grip something, especially in a chaotic moment if you're in a firefight and you're trying to reload. But with that all said, it's really, really cool, the level of work they did with the adaptive triggers, where each gun feels different, aiming down sights. I haven't really dipped into multiplayer quite yet. I've just been kind of doing a few of the co-op modes and just kind of checking things out. It's definitely a little indie, where it's the selection of modes and the way you navigate through the menus is not quite there yet. But I've heard that the real fun of this game is playing online and kind of getting that silly interaction, like almost like the old school. From what I've seen online, it reminds me of like old Halo lobbies. Like there's just people fucking around and doing goofy stuff and doing crazy trick shots and stuff like that. So I think that that's really what I need to do in order to fully immerse myself in Pavlov. But it's a neat little game that I've enjoyed checking out. And I'm just I'm trying to bring new PSVR stuff. Maybe not every week, but I think my next pickup is going to be Puzzling Places, which is a game about building little dioramas in VR. So a totally different type of game. But Holly has specifically asked me after playing the demo, like saying, hey, we need to buy this because I want to play it.
Yeah. So, Pavlov, some of the interactions that I've seen are hilarious. Like I remember like when I played a little bit, like maybe like 2 hours max back on the Vive like ages ago. And I remember seeing this clip that made me want to play it, where somebody was snuck up behind some guy and he pulled the pin out of the grenade on his belt and just ran away.
Oh yeah.
Just watched them explode and just like little things like that. It's like, that's awesome. Like just like
I love that.
Little things like that are really fun. But that's a big game.
One of the funny things when I first started playing, I was playing with our friend Jimmy Champagne, and we were both in the world, which it's weird. Multiplayer in VR is so weird. You have a different level of connection. It's like, dude, what? My character is screwed up. I'm too short. Because I was looking at Jimmy. Jimmy is probably multiple feet taller than me. And so, of course, that was portrayed in the game. He's like, well, I'm a lot taller than you. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess even in virtual reality, I have to be a short boy as well. But it's funny how that translates.
You can't escape.
Can't escape
it. I'm really glad you're liking PSVR too, because I'm not that I don't find it very appealing right now. It's just I'm not something I'm looking for. But you're doing a Sacred Symbols Plus, right? Dedicated to VR.
We are. It is scheduled. I don't know. Do we want to say? I'm always hesitant to say a guest in case it falls through. We have who you would expect to be on to talk about PSVR. It has not happened yet, so I don't want to 100% promise it. But
okay, cool.
It is scheduled. It's coming. Your PSVR review show happening soon.
Cool. Sounds great. All right. And for me, I'm just playing Wild Arms 2. I'm about 30 hours in. I think I can probably beat it in another 10 hours or so. I'm near the end. You have to do these like 4 dungeons that opens the final dungeon, and then you go to the final dungeon. I will say I am and I think I went down this path a little bit last week, but I'm perplexed by how I do not remember this game. The things that happen in it. There are certain things. I got an item for one of the characters, a hat called Texas number, like Texas NO dot. And I was like, oh, I remember that. Thinking that was weird. But so I have like new takeaways that I don't remember thinking about this game at all back in the day. First of all, the translation sucks. The writing is really bad. And this isn't the case in Wild Arms 1 or Wild Arms 3. I don't know what happened here. It reads like someone, this is what I was always talking about the difference between translating and localizing a game. It reads like it was translated and then maybe reworked a little bit, but it's just not natural. It's weird. I'm not even really sure what people are saying sometimes. And there are truly bad parts of the game because of that, I think. So this isn't a game I like super recommend to anyone. I'm playing it more for nostalgic reasons. But it is fun. I will get the platinum trophy in it, I think, and be done with it soon enough. But that's what I've been playing with, and I'm relaxing, just enjoying it, waiting for Resident Evil 4 to come out. Although I and I already bought it. I'm going to get to it eventually, which is Octopath Traveler 2. I'd really like to play as well, but I'm trying to kind of lead this into maybe getting to Resident Evil or around that time, so I can just go right into that and then go from there. So yeah, and playing Wild Arms 2, I'm enjoying it, but it's not great for sure. And I'm just so confused by how so much of a game can be erased from your memory, even though you're positive you played it, absolutely played it and beat it, and remember playing it and remember beating it. So I don't know. I just think that's, from a philosophical angle, maybe a little more interesting than I thought, but that's all. All right, my friends, let's get into the news. Some big items to go through this week. And we'll begin here. Number 1. According to typically reliable source Insider Gaming, a PlayStation 5 refresh, a so-called Pro model, if you will, is incoming. And as the website makes clear, this hardware isn't to be confused with the upcoming redesigned PlayStation 5, which will eschew a built-in disk drive as a rule with an external disk drive available for purchase. This new generation, but standard PS5, is still set for launch later this calendar year. Yet, Insider Gaming lacks much more detail about this PS5 Pro model, the other model. Other than that, Sony is aiming to launch it in late 2024, perhaps 18 months from now. However, if this story is familiar to you, it's because you may have heard it before. Last Stand's tech analyst, YouTuber, and podcaster Tom from Moore's Law is Dead broke word of a PS5 Pro back in 2021 when he reported that Sony was, quote, developing multiple versions of a new APU for a PS5 Pro to be released between late 2023 and late 2024, end quote. Furthermore, Tom tells this podcast that while PS5 Pro is real, as he reported, they haven't settled on hardware, and his, quote, understanding still is that the final decision has not yet been made. And while by now they would have narrowed down their designs to 1 or 2 options, they still probably have 2 to 6 months to decide if they want to launch something that ambitious and exactly how ambitious it should be, end quote. Tom furthermore told me, quote, it must be reiterated that Sony may decide not to launch a proper Pro console in a recession, end quote. Meanwhile, back on Insider Gaming, it's noted that a proper new PlayStation, presumably PlayStation 6, will launch no earlier than 2028. With a mid-gen refresh nearly identical to that of PS4's, that seems to make sense. Yet it indicates a longer console generation than what once was. Depending on where you lived in the world, PS1 essentially had 5 or so years on Prime Market, while PS2 was in that pocket for 6 years. The global recession early in the PS3's life cycle prolonged that generation to 7 years, and PS4 to PS5 was about the same. At 8 years between generations, it would be the longest wait ever for new PlayStation hardware. So quite a few things to get into here. Dustin, let's go to you first. What do you make of this news? Pull from whatever thread you'd like.
Yeah, I love the idea of Pro consoles because I am obsessed with new hardware. And I love the idea of getting something new. And I know a lot of people hate this. And I understand that I saw comments, people on Twitter responding to the thread being like, man, I just bought a PS5. This sucks. And I think that it can run into a potentially bad area where, and I'm trying to remember if we saw this on PlayStation 4, but if you see a upgraded hardware come out and then that kind of becomes the target point and the games on the preview or on the normal version then suddenly become not as good or something like that. I think that that's a real possibility. You are adding things to do for a developer in order to release for this Pro console. But from my perspective, as someone who is obsessed with tech and seeing the new possibilities, I would gladly buy an upgraded PlayStation 5 midway through the cycle. Again, as long as I think it's important for Sony that it is a premium version and that the target SKU is the normal one. And I think it's smart from them in the fact that you see the rise of PC gaming and even stuff that isn't necessarily gaming, but like Apple products that are insanely expensive and a premium, and people buy them like crazy. People buy $1,000 graphics cards, more than 1,000 actually, and that's one component in a PC. So I think it makes sense that Sony should look at doing a premium option for people that are willing to spend the extra cash. That maybe you get better ray tracing features, you can get 4K 60, maybe 4K 120, depending on the situation. But I think that's a wise business move. Now, of course, right now we are in a recession, so this does flip some things on its head. And as far as my graphics card comment, we are seeing a decline recently with NVIDIA in particular, who's been really, really pushing the limits of how expensive they can make their cards. But I'm excited about this. I'm curious to know more.
Chris, what do you think? Are you ready for a PS5 Pro?
I don't know. I'm kind of I'm mixed. I'm with Dustin in the sense that I always like getting a new machine because there's just something fun about that. Regardless, like it's fun opening a PS4 Pro even though you had a PS4 just because there's something new about it, even if it's not really that drastic. But at the same time, I look at obviously the economy and the recession that's happening, and not only that, but just the fact that they just put out PSVR 2, right? So you have PSVR 2, that's $500 something dollars. You have the PlayStation 5, which is still $500. People spring that money like nearly $1,000 for that unit, and then the next year there's like a better PlayStation 5, and then like it's just like, well, what the? I could see it being a little bit complicated now in comparison to the PS4 generation, where you did have this same kind of situation where you had PlayStation, then you had PSVR, and then you had PS4 Pro, but I think the economy is a big factor in this generation versus the last one. And I feel like, I don't know, I could see a lot more people being more, I could see a lot more of the audience being more upset with it now than they would have been, or than they would be during the PS4 Pro era. But at the same time, I do like shiny new boxes.
Yeah, me too, man.
I don't know.
I have really changed my opinion on Pro boxes or mid-gen refreshes since the first happened. See, what I think PS5 Pro a theoretical PS5 Pro could benefit from is what I was concerned about back in the day was what was being told to me by developers behind the scenes, which is that this is going to complicate their lives. And I think what has been realized over time was that it's not as complicated as maybe it seems, or that people thought. Think of a developer like an old school doctor, right? And you're kind of like coming in and being like, there's some new science here, and you're like, I do it my own way. And then you kind of get it through the door and you realize, okay, it's actually working out great, and the new science is what we need. I kind of feel the same way with game developers. They get into a rhythm and emotion. They don't want anything to be added to the pile of shit that they have to do. The different SKUs and versions, it's off-putting, and I get that. But ultimately, it panned out. I got a PS4 Pro myself in 2017, and I loved it. I thought it was great. It's still my primary PS4, although I think I lent it to my neighbors to use for a little while. But so we come to this era. So it would be 8 years later or so with the PS5 Pro. And so what we have is the benefit. I guess what I'm getting at is what we have is the benefit of developers knowing what it is, understanding it. There's less hesitance in the industry towards something like this.
Right.
But you guys hit on something really important, which is the juxtaposition is that in 2015, 2016, 2017, the economy was booming and not so much anymore. So that's what I think Tom at Moore's Law was saying to us, and when I was corresponding with him for the show, was there's no guarantee that they would want to do this at all. I guess I look at it though and say, I think there's a good reason to do it based on your sales expectations, because one important thing we don't know is how many PS4 Pro units sold. And I don't think it's that much. We really don't know, but I've said before, I would think it was no more than several million. Like, that's my gut instinct about the PS4 Pro. I don't think most people gave a shit. Most of your general consumers, the guy playing Call of Duty, the guy playing FIFA, the guy playing 1 or 2 first-party games a year, I just think most people didn't care. And they just went for the cheaper option. So if Sony keeps a similar mindset, we're like, we're going to sell a few million of these things, and maybe we can even do it twice, where we can make 2 revisions or whatever over time, if they're going to stretch this out over 8 or 9 years. But as long as the expectations are kept low, I think that's reasonable enough. So yeah, they're running into a different problem now, which is money, as opposed to the problem then was buy-in, but not the monetary kind. Dustin.
I have another thought about this too, just from a reason why they shouldn't do it, I guess, is that one of the big differences is PS4 Pro came at a time when people were upgrading their TVs to 4K. And there was a very clear reason to get a PS4 Pro, is that this one does 4K. Your old PS4,
that's true, yeah.
You're not taking advantage of your new TV. That's what it came during a time when 4K TVs were first starting to become affordable. And so now it's harder to sell the reason for an upgrade when there's not a new I mean, you can say, yeah, well, it has better ray tracing, it has better frame rates, or it maintains 4K better than the old one. It gets really muddy.
Yeah.
Whereas PS4 Pro is just, this one works with your 4K TV. That's like a very clear selling point right out the gate. And so you definitely have an uphill battle now in trying to convince people why you need a better. I guess it's not hard to convince me and a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are very in depth, the people that watch Digital Foundry videos and care about the performance. And maybe there's a big enough audience, Colin, like you were saying, like few million that are into that. But as far as the general population, I think they're going to look at this and say, it already does 4K. It already looks great. Why do I need this?
And you don't have that. Like people, there are 8K TVs, and I'm sure like some psychos are getting them, but like you are reaching into diminishing returns at a certain point where your screen can only be so big before you start to not really notice that much of a difference. And I know a lot of it is pixel density for sure, but like I don't know, like a 4K screen on your phone is just a waste. Like it's just
I don't get that. You see Androids do that.
Yeah, but it's
4K
so
screen. It's like, okay,
it's such a waste. It's too small. Everything's 4K on that side, on that small of a screen. So yeah, you don't have that hardware push, that external hardware push where there's like a huge importance placed on 4K. To really get the most out of 8K, you'd need a living space that's insane. You'd need like a living room with
the only place I saw an 8K monitor
ceiling.
ever was in an Apple store in my own life.
An 8K monitor is extra stupid.
It was a wall. You know, that's how big I think it needs to even be to
to
truly
even see like
it.
To even see what's special about it. So that is a good point. I hadn't even it's been so long I haven't even thought about that being that time where everybody was like upgrading to 4K.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I also think because I want to ask you guys in a moment what we can even expect out of these consoles, but to the PS4 Pro thing, it's just that I could be totally wrong. I might be totally wrong, but I don't know why they wouldn't try to say how many. You couldn't even find the PS4 Pro. They weren't even interested in making them. Don't you guys remember? Do you remember that? Like you couldn't even buy them. I went and looked on Amazon right now. You can't buy one.
Oh, they're definitely gone now.
Yeah. But you would think they would still be they're making PS4s, right? So it's like you would think they would make PS4 Pros, but they're not making PS4 Pros because I think that they're not really lighting the world on fire.
Well,
I think it was. Go ahead.
I just also think everybody who wanted a PS4 Pro for any real reason got it already. And anybody who's interested in a PS4 now probably doesn't really care. They clearly don't care about performance or, or visual fidelity if they're making that purchase. And if they do care about that purchase, guess what? PS5 is there. Yeah. I think that's what it is. I think PS5 has ultimately replaced PS4 Pro because that is the machine that has the highest fidelity, highest output, highest performance. And that was the purpose of the PS4 Pro before the PS5 came out. So why continue? Especially if the other machine is way cheaper to make and way cheaper to sell. It just doesn't. I think that's ultimately what happened.
I think it's insane that they're still selling. It's not really insane, but I was at Target. I feel like that's something I say regularly. I was at Target with Holly. We were looking at PlayStation stuff, and there's new PS4s on the shelf. And she asked me, "Who's buying this for $300?"
That's crazy.
A PS4. This old ass hardware.
People who don't know no better.
Only for $100 cheaper than it was when it launched in 2013.
Right. And technically $100 cheaper than a PS5 if you're talking about the digital version. It just seems, I guess there's a market for it though. They wouldn't be putting these on shelves if the people weren't spending $300 on a PS4 in the year of our Lord 2023. It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. And that was my point about, I think Chris is right that you want to sell and manufacture the cheaper unit, but you think they would have just phased out the original PS4 at some point and be like, the PS4 Pro is the PS4. And now we have this new thing. But I just, in other words, I'd be surprised. We're at 115 or 120 million PS4 sold. I would be surprised if that number was 10 million or something like that. That would be shocking to me. Or 20 million. It's like, no way. There's just no way that there's that many Pro units out there. I'd be shocked if that was true. So I think it's just, as long as they go into it with being a niche item, I think it could be okay. But then you wonder where the money could be extracted from that. But Dustin, I wanted to go back to you, and I'll go back to you too, Chris, with this after. But what could this thing do? I mean, what could improve, do you think?
I think that the biggest sore spot that I'm noticing from watching Digital Foundry videos is the ray tracing performance is just not quite there yet. If you want to use ray tracing, you're going to have compromises in terms of frame rate and sometimes even resolution. So I think beefing up your ray tracing cores is probably the first thing. And then in addition, just with that extra headroom is boosting more games to be either being native 4K 60 or more games running at 120 FPS. I'm really curious on the data out there of how many people are interested in using high frame rate modes. I'm sure that it's going up as more people get TVs, but
I have some anecdote about this that I heard from a person who works, I might have said this on the show. I know someone that works on a shooter who said that they natively put people into 60 frames when the game begins, and that 70% of gamers drop it to 30 frames to get the higher resolution. So 70%? It is still, yeah. And it's a notable game. But it's unclear if that number is ticking up or ticking down. I have no idea.
Simians, by the way. That is simian behavior. That is insane. You are crazy.
So it's 70-30 on a console, a well-known console shooter. Yeah.
Out of your mind.
That is truly shocking.
Like, my respect for this entire industry has plummeted.
But didn't we see that? That was what I was saying with Gotham Knights. I mean, I'm like,
no, yeah. I mean, clearly, but like
it runs at straight up 30 frames no matter what you do.
No, but that's what I mean. It's like you'd think, like, if given the option, like to on purpose cut your frames in half. That's like human centipede level insanity. Like, you might as well just show your mouth to somebody else's ass. Like, I don't know what you're doing. Like, why would you do that?
The crazier thing, though, is that they set you up the other way.
Right.
So people are doing this. So that's even crazier, I think. In other words, if the number was 70-30 and it was just like, this is what it is, I'd be like, I believe that. I assume a lot of people don't even fucking know any better.
Yeah.
But what it's saying I think some developers is that people care about the quality of the picture much more than they care about the way the video runs in the game, as it were, the movement runs.
That's crazy.
So it's interesting. I just thought to throw that out there. I'm sorry, I interrupted you though, Dustin. Do you have more you want to add?
Oh yeah. So I touched on ray tracing, better performance. I think that's it. So
yeah, what do you think, Chris? I mean, I will notice that I will say this. I'm not that I've played the widest spectrum of PS5 games, but I've been playing it since launch. I play all my games on PS5. Hogwarts Legacy is the first game I encountered where I'm like, this game is actually slowing down in a major way. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, happened to me.
And so just more processing power, right? I mean, that goes without saying, but I mean, I think that it just needs more juice, because that makes me a little worried. Avalanche isn't the greatest studio in the world, but they worked on this game for a long time, and it just makes me wonder how this game. I can't wait to see this game on PS4. I cannot wait, and I cannot wait to see it on the Switch. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dustin covered the main. Better frame rate, better ray tracing, Papa John's. I feel like that's all they have left really to improve upon, because everything else is kind of under the hood. It's stuff that's not really. It's not sexy to market. It's not really all that interesting from a consumer perspective. I think those are the only real features that will notably make a difference. Like, honestly, to me, most of the games that I play on PlayStation or the Xbox Series X, they run at 60 to 120 anyway. And so for me, as somebody who doesn't really care that much about resolution, who doesn't really care that much about ray tracing, outside of the fact that I just like shiny new machines, I don't know if this thing would really appeal to me in the same way that the PS4 Pro did, because the PS4 Pro, at least, like, that was in an era of like 30 frames per second was like kind of like the default. And so you would get some increase in resolution, and some games would run at higher frame rates. And I remember being like, oh, cool, that's definitely something that's worth it. It wasn't as many games as I hoped at the time, but it was enough to justify. It's like, okay, yeah, if I could play this at 60 on this machine, then like, yeah, I'll do that. But now, every game more or less runs at the frame rate that I prefer. It runs at a resolution that I'm satisfied with. So I can imagine it being somewhat of a hard sell Especially, obviously, we've talked about this already in the economy, but I really do think those are the only things that they have, ray tracing and frame rate, to really market. And if, that anecdote is true, that most people don't care about frame rate to the point where they're actively crippling themselves on purpose, then all you really have is ray tracing. And I mean, I guess that's it, right? Because maybe faster download speed, but that's not even really dependent on the hardware. That's maybe bigger hard drive space. Maybe that's something that they could do, like a way, way, way bigger drive, so that way you're not constantly deleting things. So that way Warzone doesn't take up 50% of your hard drive. I don't know.
It's funny. I still haven't had
situation.
any problems with that, but it's because I'm surprised I play single player games, and I'm surprised by how small the packages are becoming. But yeah, for people that are constantly uploading or updating games, it's going to be 750 gigs is just insufficient.
Like live service games are pretty big. Like I think Destiny is like 100 and something. I'm sure Call of Duty is like 150 plus. Because they don't know. I remember that was an issue with Titanfall 1 back in the day, like on the original Xbox One, because like they didn't compress their files, so it was like the biggest game that they had ever seen. It was like 50 gigs. Yeah. It's hilarious now. Like that's cute almost today.
I did see. You can now upgrade your PlayStation. You can get an SS or an NVMe drive for your PlayStation 5 that is under $100 to add 1 terabyte of storage to it. There's a YouTuber that made a video about it. I can't remember the name, but it's funny now how that's worked out, just as a side note. But the PlayStation 5 drives were so expensive, and they were getting a lot of flack for that. And it wasn't even available at launch. And Xbox's solution was pretty nice, that you just go out and buy one. But now there's a problem that storage for the Xbox has remained the exact same price. And there's no other people manufacturing it. I think there's some kind of deal with Seagate or something. But it's good news now. You can get you can upgrade for like $85 or something like that. Get another terabyte.
Yeah, but then you have that awkward dongle hanging off your nice machine. Like I always hated external. Oh, is it like is it something you slot in?
This is the slot inside for the new NVMe drive that you put in, and it meets the. I think it's slightly beyond the minimum spec required.
That's way better.
Yeah. It's a good. It was a smart move in hindsight, looking forward, to say let's make this such a non-Sony move to say we're making a non-proprietary expansion drive in the PS5, which is good. But
they're burned from the Vita is what that is. That's holdover trauma from the from the Vita. But I mean, I do think the only other thing that they could do is really just boost the base hard drive space, especially theoretically if they're going to be boosting ray tracing capabilities, that might boost that potentially has the possibility of maybe increasing file sizes. Not too much, considering how efficient the PS5 is at dealing with that stuff, but it would be nice to have just a really, really unbelievably big hard drive for once, because I feel like every single generation, every piece of new hardware for PlayStation and Xbox too, by the way, seems to launch with hard drive space that just feels insufficient. I don't know if you guys have felt this, but like, and maybe not personally, but just like generally, just based on what you know about games, it's like 500 gigabytes is not enough. Like that's a paltry amount. And then like even 1 terabyte, I remember feeling like you could have had 2. I feel like let's get that to 2. I think 2 is an acceptable like amount of hard drive space for a games oriented machine.
Yeah,
it's wild how expectations have changed and how game sizes have changed. I remember noting on Knockback that Ocarina of Time is 32 megabytes, which is incredible. I remember when I got my Sony Vaio Pentium processor, 1996, $3,000 machine. It had 1.3 gigabytes of space, hard drive space, and that was considered like outrageous. So it's just so funny how everything has changed so rapidly, and you reflect on just the different expectations. Like if you went back 20 years ago and people were listening to us talking about terabyte storage, they'd be like, "What are you even talking about? How is that even possible? I'm still using zip drives with 100 megabyte disks, and you're talking about terabyte hard drives and how common they are. It's an incredible thing. All right, my friends, let's move on. Number 2, there's some interesting tidbits related to The Last of Us circulating that are very much worth discussing, both in regard to the game franchise and the HBO show. First and foremost is perhaps the most interesting tidbit of all in this little burst of news. An external studio nearly made a prequel to The Last of Us, according to The Last of Us' co-creator and Naughty Dog's co-president Neil Druckmann. And a conversation held by gaming outlet Kinda Funny, as relayed by website Video Games Chronicle. The beginning of the final episode of The Last of Us' first season. Oh, by the way, I should say this. I knew I meant to say this before. I should have wrote a note because I was like, you're going to forget. This spoils the final episode of the HBO show and actually doesn't spoil anything in the game. So I wanted to note that. So fast forward if you don't want to hear this. Okay, I'm going to go back and begin the sentence again. In a conversation held by gaming outlet Kinda Funny, as relayed by website Video Games Chronicle, the beginning of the final episode of The Last of Us' first season on HBO was actually a truncated version of a story that Neil and company had once hoped would be a game. In the beginning of the 9th episode, we see something we never see in either The Last of Us game, Ellie's birth. We meet her mother, Anna, who we only know by name, and no doubt most importantly, we learn why Ellie is immune to cordyceps. Neil told Kinda Funny in part, quote, there was a more full version of that story that went back in time that was going to be made into a video game, not by Naughty Dog, but a different studio, end quote. Neil went on to explain that Kinda Funny co-founder Greg Miller, quote, introduced me to that studio. We had talked to them for quite a while to do this thing, and then it didn't quite work out, end quote. Everyone has been wondering what the studio in question is, and I think I know based on my knowledge of Greg, who he's close with and what kind of team that would take on something like this. Fulbright, the creators of Gone Home in Tacoma. That, of course, is speculation, but I'd bet on it. So I want to stop here real quick. I thought about this for a while, and I'm like, I bet you it's Fulbright. Greg was very close to Gaynor back in the day, and this seems like the kind of thing you might do for them. And I don't know who else would have the prestige to touch The Last of Us that is also close to Greg. But I also don't, I don't know. It could be anyone, but that's my prediction. All right, so let me go back here. Druckmann also confirmed on the show, on Kinda Funny show, that Naughty Dog is at work on their next game, that it could be The Last of Us Part 3, which he admits at least some people at their studio were keen to make. And he likewise confirms that the next project out of Naughty Dog will be the much vaunted and sometimes teased multiplayer game in The Last of Us universe, which we lovingly refer to as Factions. The seemingly two-player co-op game is swirling in mystery, though key art indicates it takes place in San Francisco. Druckmann says we will see more of the game later this year, and based on the way he talks about it, it sounds like a 2024 release that rumors indicate may be also coming to PlayStation 4, in addition to PS5. And then there's the HBO show. The aforementioned 9th and final episode of the first season concluded with record viewership for the series, and while fellow HBO series House of the Dragon, a Game of Thrones spinoff, had episodes with a slightly higher viewership, overall per-episode viewership of The Last of Us was actually higher, an astounding feat. And with the first season covering the entirety of the first game, some have been curious how they intend to cover the second game. Based on a conversation both Druckmann and co-creator Craig Mazin gave with the publication GQ, here's what Mazin said about the second season in relation to the second game, quote, there are going to be things that are going to be different, and there are things that are going to be identical. There are things that are going to be added and enriched. There are some things that are going to be flipped. Our goal remains exactly what it was for the first season, which is to deliver a show that makes fans happy, end quote. And most importantly, Druckmann said this, quote, it's more than one season, end quote. Very good. Much to talk about here. Dustin, let me throw it over to you. Anything here speak to you at all? Obviously, I'm the biggest Last of Us fan here. I know that you guys are probably loath to talk about this too much, but I'm curious what you think about this. Possibilities of The Last of Us Part 3. Although some people are reading into what he was saying as them not doing it. I feel like they might be. I hope they return to it if they're not doing it immediately. Factions will be up next, and we'll see it more later this year. So that's exciting. The show outperforming in cumulative overall. I was going to say traffic, overall viewership, even over a Game of Thrones prequel. And then the notion that they're going to rework some of what we know about The Last of Us Part 2 and that it will take place more than one season. So even though it hasn't been greenlit for 3 seasons, it seems like they're confident that will happen. So pull it as usual, whatever thread you'd like.
I'm actually going to pull a detail that you didn't just mention, but I think is worth talking about is that this rumor about it potentially Factions, whatever this multiplayer game, coming to PS4 also. Ugh. I hate.
I did mention that
hearing
here.
that. Well, no, I'm saying when you wrapped up different points. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, shit, did I forget to say? Okay.
No. You got it. It's so frustrating hearing this, and I understand there's two sides of it. Sony, we know about their live service initiative and how important it is that they're going to have all these different games. Of course, this is one of them. And so it would make sense to put it on a machine that has such a large install base, but it's just, it's time. It's truly time. We can't be releasing a first-party PS4 game in 2024. I don't know. This is
11
one of
years
those
after the
things.
console came out.
Yeah, like it truly feels like, man, I don't know. I'm not a developer. I always try to admit that and understand there are or state that there are things that I don't understand and I don't know the full context, but I can't help but think about how this old ass hardware is holding back this game at this point, whatever this is. So that's really frustrating to hear. As far as the show, it was awesome to see the success of it. And I think that what we can take away, I'm a Last of Us fan, of course. And I think, Colin, you portrayed it right that we have different varying degrees of our fandom. But I can definitely say I really enjoy the show. I love the games. Even if you're not a fan of this game, I think that you should be celebrating its success, but also why it was successful. And I think that you can really see we tried not to to burn Halo too much, but it was brought up a few times that you see these two shows beside each other and you see one be successful and one not. And one, while taking some creative liberties and doing different things, showing a reverence to the source material and how essential that is. It is important to adapt and change. You can't just take one medium and directly translate it to another. It doesn't work. There needs to be changes, but it's about that respect for the source material. And so to see something, do it right and be rewarded for it is excellent. And hopefully other teams, other studios, other, production houses, whatever, that are looking at making adaptations are looking at this success and saying, that's what we need to do. We need to mirror how they did it. And ultimately, that's a great thing. I hope that we do see a change. I'm a person right now who lives in constant fear of the live action One Piece coming out and seeing that horrifying first trailer and then having everybody ask me like, oh no, Dustin, did you see this? Are you going to watch it? Did you see how bad it is? Chris recently just lived through this. I'm sure he has PTSD from the Halo show. So it's nice to see proper adaptations happening. So I've ranted enough on our ranting PlayStation podcast.
Oh, I don't care. You can go on as long as you want. That's just the whole idea.
Yeah.
Chris, what do you think? Any threads you'd like to pull at?
Yeah, I mean, I want to reiterate just the fact that we gotta stop with the PS4 stuff, guys. We really, please stop.
Cut it out.
Please stop.
By the way, the source of this rumor is that Naughty Dog is hiring for for that experience, which would make no sense if they weren't making a game for PS4.
Yeah. Also, just like the live service realities of like, we want this game to be big and we want this game to be everywhere. So we're gonna put it on the TI-83 and we're gonna put it on the Kenmore fridge and we're gonna put it on. It's just I'm tired. Put it on PC. That's it. Put it on PC.
PS5 and PC seem good to me.
I would. And maybe this, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I would rather see factions on PS5, Xbox Series X, and PC than on PS4 at all. I
said that on a recent guest appearance, actually, I did on a podcast, that they should release it on Xbox if they could.
I think, I think it would be smart, to be honest with you. I think, why not? I think just generally, just the fact that PS4 is getting new installments this late is, I understood it for a little bit. I understood it because of the economic realities. I understood it because of the pandemic realities. And now, quite frankly, my patience is very, very gone for it. Like, I don't see a point. It's objectively holding things back. If Hogwarts Legacy is having trouble running on the PS5, there's no reason why a new Last of Us game should be coming out on PS4. Sorry.
Yeah, well said.
But beyond that, I do think they did a great job with the show. I think it makes sense that what they're doing with The Last of Us Part 2 is restructuring it, because that was the primary problem, in my opinion, with The Last of Us Part 2, was the way that it was structured, the way that it was edited, the non-linearity of it. And I do feel like if it was just told in a straightforward way, it would have been a lot more well received. And also, they don't want to... I mean, I don't know how... No,
I know. You can't... I know what you're going to say, and I agree with you.
Yeah, it's a difficult... it's a difficult situation to justify just a 2-season version of this story, given certain developments that happen. So I think they're smart to restructure it. I think they're smart to maybe I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily a spoiler, but there are flashbacks in The Last of Us Part 2 that kind of, and it's very non-linear. It was my main source of frustration with it. And I do think largely what's going to happen with season 2 is that they're going to re-edit it, and they're going to tell it in the order that most people would feel makes sense. And
also put off the big thing in it.
They'll lead up to it a little bit. If it happens, I don't know, man.
That'd be wild if they did it.
Dude, I could see a reality where I think they understand why that would be a problem for a TV show. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it. I think they did a great job with the show. I'm grateful that we have an adaptation of a video game that is close enough to the source material that you could very, very see the reverence in it, see the respect in it. I do think The Last of Us of every single video game adaptation had the best shot at this, given how inherently cinematic and just kind of grounded that game is in comparison. Like you're not going to see a Mega Man TV show, or at least not one with this sincere reverence or
no, they did one they did one in the last few years that was like a total spin-off and everyone hated it, but they never even tried to make it real.
What I'm saying is that there are games that lend themselves more, and I think Witcher is one of those too, by the way. And I think The Last of Us is a good IP to take and transpose, and I think it lends itself well to it. I think they did a good job. I haven't been on any of the spoiler casts, and I will say I do think, just purely from a viewer standpoint, I do think the ending is slightly rushed, but like not in like a particularly like nuclear bad way. It's just,
I think we could use another episode.
Yeah, I think one more episode would have been good.
By the way, neither of you were on it. Or Dustin, you were on it.
He was on it. I'm sure, right?
I didn't know if you were on every episode, but you were, except for
not
one?
all of them.
Yeah, except for one or two.
I'm not.
So you were there for when I said this, which was because we had Gene on for one or whatever. But what do you think, Chris, about my conspiracy theory? Not really a conspiracy theory, but just this. I think the show is 9 episodes long because it gets people for 3 months without them having to spend the money to produce like 11 or 12 episodes. So if you subscribe to HBO and it's like, okay, episode 1, and then 4 episodes pass, that's 28 days. So by the time you get to the 5th episode, that's 35, and then so on. And then you're past the 3rd month boundary by the 9th episode. So they charge you again, and then they get out.
Right. Because otherwise they would
something to do with it.
Because otherwise they would have to make another month's worth of episodes to kind of keep
so they make the bare minimum number of episodes while still getting the maximum number of subscribers for that month. That has to be intentional, right? 9 episodes.
It does feel a little bizarre.
I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that was something I would, if I was at HBO, I'd be like, we should totally do that.
Yeah.
Or make like 13 episodes instead of 12, or like, so you get them for 4 months.
Right. No, exactly.
Yeah. But I, with that said, I do think that we could have used another episode or two. Yeah. But we'll leave so the spoiler casts are exclusive to Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. Dude, the last spoiler cast is 2.5 hours long, I think. I mean, if you want to get like really deep into the weeds with Dagan's on them, Mike is on them. We have a few guests a couple of times. I think we had Ben on one or something. Maybe I know we had Gene on one, but people weren't happy with Gene being on it because they felt like Gene knew too much because he had seen the entire thing. And in fact, Gene had tweeted out, I didn't know this. He had tweeted out that his screener was so early that the famous scene in the last episode, which is, everyone knows what it is, but whatever, it was actually not done in that screener. And cool. You just saw it without any of the special effects, which is pretty cool. And I'm surprised they sent it out like that. Okay, guys, let's do a gut check real quick before we move on. Ben Sender wrote into us on Patreon, says, what we already knew to be true has been confirmed. Naughty Dog is working on their next game outside of Factions. Just a quick gut check. Is their next game The Last of Us Part 3? I feel like if it wasn't, then Neil would just say it's something new in his interviews because it doesn't really reveal anything. But there must be a reason he is keeping the door open. I actually agree with your sentiment there, and I actually think that's a really good point, because what do you have to lose by saying no? The next game is not The Last of Us. Like, what? That would only get people, all you're doing is confirming one thing, and getting everyone really, really excited. So I think there is that element. But here's the thing, Kristen, we'll throw it over to you. Part of me feels, it's like heart and mind, right? Part of me feels that they would be stupid to walk away from The Last of Us now. You have these two great games. The Last of Us Part 2, by the way, has been the best-selling PS4 game basically all year. So coming out of nowhere, and the Last of Us Part 2 and all of the different things and leading in the factions. You have the HBO show with more seasons coming. Wouldn't you want to keep going and take advantage of that? But it feels like too much to me. But here's the heart versus mind thing. Then you think about the rumors at a Guerrilla and with Horizon, where it's like, Horizon Zero Dawn remake, Horizon MMO, Horizon multiplayer game, Horizon 3, Horizon Netflix show. I mean, that's literally all the things that are happening. Yeah. So if that's their mentality, then it would seem that would also be true with Naughty Dog. If that's not true, then maybe the mentality is something new and different. The one important thing is that I do believe them when they say they have the option to do whatever they want. I do believe that Sony was like, do whatever you want. But I do think now is the time to strike. And as I've said before, and it is no spoilers, The Last of Us Part 2 demands another game much more than the first game demanded another game. So if they gave you the second game, you got to finish it up now with the third game. It's not over as far as I'm concerned. You can't leave it the way it was left.
Yep.
IMO. What do you think?
I mean, I would say, get ready for the horizoning. That's absolutely, it's over now. Like, it's over. It's just the Naughty Dog is The Last of Us now. And I do think that they could do whatever they want, but I do think it's I do think Sony's probably like strongly being like, hey, you could do whatever you want, but also, I mean, and I think that's kind of what's going on. You're going to have probably, I would imagine at least 3 to 4 seasons of The Last of Us if they can manage to do it. Maybe even more. Who the hell even knows? Yeah,
if they get the third game out and they coincide with each other, I mean, that could be the plan. I mean, that could be an ambitious thing that you don't want to necessarily fuck up.
Yeah.
That could be.
And then they could do Last of Us Part 2 remake with Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. It's over. It's side stories. It's all going to be dreary hellscapes from here on out with Naughty Dog. And, it's going to make up a ton of money. It's going to be very, very prestigious, I'm sure. And, God bless them. I wish them the best. But it's also very sad. It's also very disheartening because, like, we've talked. I mean, Colin, we've talked about this happening with Horizon, where, like, you very much appreciate Horizon. You like it. It's something that, like, is very, very important. And just to see it kind of thrown into the wind, like, here's an MMO here, and in some ways we don't even know what Factions is. Like, it could be like MMO light almost. Like, we have no idea what their plans are. We know it's live service, probably in all likelihood. We know that it's going to be like cross-generational, which is also disappointing. I don't know. I just feel like we are on this road where I would be surprised sincerely if we got anything that wasn't The Last of Us out of Naughty Dog for the next 7 years. I would be absolutely staggered. And that's depressing because I feel like they're more creative than that. But I don't think the environment necessitates them to be creative because they don't have to be. Or at least not in the realms that I wish they could be. Not in the realms that, like, I would like to see something striking, like visually distinct, very, very out of left field, very, very strange. It's going to be more Last of Us, and they struck gold.
Well, that's a conclusive answer for you, Ben, from Chris anyway, that he thinks The Last of Us Part 3 is next up. I'm curious what you have to say about this, Dustin, because I think there could be an argument. This is the argument I would make maybe to Neil and to the company, about if they were cared about what I would think about any of this, which they wouldn't, of course, but people are always going to wonder about what's next with The Last of Us. And if you make the next game that's not The Last of Us, that's totally fine. But the expectation is that you're going to go back at some point. Now, you never have to, but people are going to continually ask. Or you could seize the moment, as it were, and look at Neil. Neil's still young. He's now getting into TV. He might have 5 games left before he retires, right? I mean, because games take a long time to make, maybe 7. And it's like, listen, Neil, you're going to spend one of those games on The Last of Us Part 3, whether you do it now or do it later. I think if I were Sony and I were talking to him for that, you should do it now. It benefits us as a company. That the series is huge. It's all the synergistic stuff, but it also just wrap it up and walk away from it. Say, like, this is it. this is the last one. This is The Last of Us Part 3. We're just like you did with Uncharted 4 when you said we're done. Now we're obviously going to get more Uncharted from another studio, likely about, yeah. I don't want to spoil Uncharted 4, but in terms of this, so that I wonder what you feel about that, Dustin. If that's the way I would approach it, is like, listen, just get this monkey off your back now, and then you guys can literally don't even have to worry about it because you can set it up from the very beginning that we're never going back to this, that this is over, conclude it, and then you're free. And otherwise, you're never going to be free because people are always going to want the third one until you go do it. So you're never going to be free. And that's the way I would do it. So I feel like the argument, it's very salient, the arguments, I think, saying that, yeah, they're just going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that one thing to consider, too, is that now is the least painful time to do it. And I know that Naughty Dog operates in a way that they're very perfectionist. They hand create everything, but I would imagine it is easier to create a sequel to a game when that's the last game you made, right? They're currently refining the gameplay and working on a Last of Us game with factions, and they can kind of ride right into it. And I know this is a bad word for some people in this industry, though I think it's stupid. You can reuse a lot of those assets, and it's fine. If an asset is good,
the climbing animations, boat
animations, climbing animation. That rope is the same rope. It's like if it was a good rope animation, that's fine.
Yeah, the boat animations were, oh my goodness, love it.
As opposed to doing it next generation or something where you have to do more things from scratch in order to stay current. Like I said, now is, I think, the easiest time for them to do this. And I think, Colin, you make a compelling point about it. Just seize the day. Now's the time to do it. And I think that Ben is correct in his write-in. It's like, why wouldn't he just say it? And I think that it's in their best interest to just let the mystery be right now, because it's not hurting anything for them to say what it is or what it isn't. And especially coming off of Last of Us Part 2, where you have people within the studio getting attacked for the game, they would maybe just rather let it be a mystery for now. And I would imagine too that they think that they announced Last of Us Part 2 too early. I think that's universally agreed upon. They announced it too early. So Neil, I can understand being a little gun shy, saying they're working on Last of Us Part 3, right? Like, just I would hope that he's of the mindset that when we want to announce it, we're gonna really announce it and be ready to go. And it's not gonna be some vague, we're working on this, it's years away, like the last game was.
Yeah, I would hope that they understand that they have the cachet to be like, we're announcing The Last of Us Part 3, it'll be out in 4 months. You know, that would be awesome. That would be great. Like, that would be like sick. That's wonderful. I would be totally about that. But I will say, if Naughty Dog is listening, you're going to be on this for a while. No excuse not to make The Fast of Us now. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. No excuse. Yep. No excuse. If you're go ahead, have fun with it at least. You know, why not? It would have made no sense before this, but now you got a popular TV show. It's going to run for 26 seasons. Just throw that in there. Why not? I want it.
On a serious note, it would be funny if there was like a $19.99 price, $24.99 price, The Fast of Us that was just super, some other team made super goofy. Yeah. I just don't think they wanted, like where you're fighting, where you're racing, it's like the infected versus Tess.
Dude, that's so funny. That's so funny. Like,
it is funny, but I don't know if they want to do that. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think Naughty Dog's too self-serious. I think it would be awesome for them to release this. Like imagine they put out this like prestigious line of serious, like this very serious trilogy. And then just out of nowhere, it's like, here's a ridiculous kart racer, or here's this ridiculous thing that kind of takes the piss out of it. I think that'd be awesome. And I feel like it's an energy that is sadly kind of missing, like from the industry in general. I feel like everything is too self-serious. Everything is very much like, everything wants to be the next big thing. They're very quick to not kind of, not kind of I don't know. I think self-deprecation is fun, and I think it's a cool thing. And I think a lot of studios used to do this sort of thing.
Definitely, they used to do it.
Yeah, they used to do it too. Absolutely, dude. Crash Team Racing was made as like a complete joke. Like, I'm pretty sure they made that game, and I think I heard interviews about this, like where they made that game to tank Crash as an IP before they left it with whoever owns it. They were just like, let's make a stupid, just nonsensical, like an alien comes to Earth and they're trying to make a parking lot and they got a race for it. Wouldn't that be so stupid? And everybody loved it. So like, I don't know, just have fun again. If at the very least, if we're stuck in this universe, at least like have fun with it.
And I think Jack X or whatever was one of Neil Druckmann's first games at Naughty Dog. I could be wrong. Maybe it might have been Jack 3, but
yeah.
I just think, I really think that everything lines up for them to just do this now. Just get the monkey off your back, take advantage of the situation, finish it up, and then walk away from it, and then leave it behind. I think that would be really, really ideal. And they're made for this right now. So yeah, I think that you just have to, bite the bullet. But I would be curious to see what happens. And there is this outside possibility, I guess, that that factions could be The Last of Us Part 3. Like I'm not saying they're literally going to call it that, but that it could be something. What I'm interested in, though, with The Last of Us is very similar to what I'm interested in or was interested in with Call of the Mountain, which I think I haven't beaten it, but I played more than half of it. I think that it fails this task, which is that it doesn't work without Ellie and Joel, or Ellie or Joel. And we're going to find that out. And I don't think Horizon works without Aloy, to be honest. At least not in the way I've experienced Call of the Mountain. I'm not really into this. I like Aloy. The best part of the game is when you see Aloy in the very beginning. Yeah, that's and how small she is. She's so small in the game. It's very weird, actually. Have you seen that? The model of her, she's like so small. Yeah. I don't know that I realized she was so small in the game. She's like maybe 5'2", something like that.
I keep playing that game. I have no fucking clue what's going on.
It's no idea. It's not very. I gotta be honest. It's not very good.
It's not very good. No,
it's
I'm not
cool.
enjoying it.
It's pretty. It reminds me of Link's crossbow training. It's what I said. It's like a really glorious non-rails Link's crossbow training.
Yeah, if you like
with some pretty cool combat. Yeah, it's all cool.
Climbing in it.
It's the climbing's cool. The combat with the different dinosaurs is cool, but I'm not quite sure what I'm playing here. Like this can't be it. Also, I cannot see anything without a little bit of a blur. So I'm just letting you all know that as well.
Side comment real quick. Naughty Dog, Chris brings up the Fast of Us. Bring back Donut Drake.
Donut Drake.
Or I guess in the form of Donut Ellie. Okay?
Yeah,
don't be a coward. Bring it
Donut
back.
Ellie. Dude, Donut Drake.
Imagine how funny that would be. Dude, everyone's starving.
The fact that they did that at all, the fact that Donut Drake is real at all is kind of an indication of what I'm talking about. It's like, dude, you can still have something that's like really prestigious and industry leading and very, very cool and still have fun with it. Like, it's just like, and just, I don't know. I don't know what happened. There's like a self-seriousness that's kind of invaded everything. And it kind of makes me say, I don't even think it's limited to games. I think it's kind of everything. I think it's cinema. I think it's even content creation. You know,
well,
it's just sad.
You're right, and it's so funny because I was having a conversation about this recently, where with Micah, where we were talking, and I was saying a really key component to my life, as I think anyone who knows me knows, is I'm never serious for very long. I really can't do it, and it's not any other reason than I just feel like there's a natural comedy if you choose to embrace things. And that we don't always have to take ourselves or situations so seriously. That's why I love memes. That's why I love inappropriate memes. I love your 9/11 memes. I love your nuclear war memes. I love any meme that you can have out there about the worst thing, Russian invasion memes, whatever. Because it is, as I said earlier, in my Italian family, I'd always say, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So it's important to definitely do that. And I have to remind myself of that constantly. But I think I live my life, generally speaking, where I'm just always goofing off or always being silly or always telling a joke. And maybe it's sad clown syndrome in a way, but I think that's probably true in some sense. But I like that people, and I'm not saying the audience, you can think whatever you want, but people in my life think I'm funny, like my family and all these things. That I like that I bring that levity, and that it kind of it's juxtaposed to my own internal sadness. Like it's like a little bit of fuel to try to be more normal, try to be more funny, try to be more social. So it's good to keep levity, and you see that in I think you see that in The Last of Us, and I think you see that in The Last of Us in HBO. Like the whole, all the jokes, the dad jokes, and all these different things they do. Like there is part of that is trying to break the ice and making it more human. And I would also say humor is human as well.
Yeah.
The who's worse than like a straight up not funny, doesn't laugh, doesn't tell jokes? Who wants to be around a person like that?
Yeah.
A lame ass, doesn't have any sense of humor.
Yeah, it's nothing worse than that.
It's awful.
Except for maybe like a pedophile or something.
A pedophile, right?
Yeah.
What about a pedophile that has no sense of humor?
What about a pedophile that has the best sense of humor and then it's conflicting?
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's tough.
Uh-oh.
That's terrible.
That's tough.
Where did Jared lie in that? We brought
Jared?
him up earlier. Where does he qualify?
I don't think Jared's very funny.
Yeah, I don't know that he was known for his comedic wit.
I don't think his material's all that good.
Jesus Christ. Let's move on. Number 3. With a special piece of Castlevania DLC recently having been released for Dead Cells, the slick 2D Metroidvania from Motion Twin first released some 4 years ago, there seems to be a certain something in the air. And thanks to the eagle eyes from website Gamatsu, it appears Castlevania publisher and IP holder Konami may agree. Gamatsu points to a Japanese trademark filing for a so-called Project Zircon. Now, reading it, which you can do if you know Japanese or simply by using a translator, you'll find some scary things in the filing. It has a ton of classifications, just like Western and especially American trademarks, and some seem to point to other Konami products like vending and gambling machines. But there's also clear as day reference to gaming software. So how does Zircon indicate it's Castlevania? Well, it isn't certain, but it's very likely. Zircon is a stone found in Metroidvania-style Castlevania games, beginning with 1997's Symphony of the Night, and is a gemstone like other gemstones and items you can find that can be sold to the librarian for currency to buy other items. This application for the trademark is indeed Konami's, so putting 2 and 2 together, it's fairly obvious what this is. In a separate and unrelated conversation with website IGN, Konami producer Sutomu Taniguchi noted in part, quote, "We tried to bring back the games that people loved and cherished with the Castlevania Anniversary Collection and the Castlevania Advanced Collection. Both of them were awesome. We also brought back Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night for our PlayStation fans and on mobile, also awesome, and launched Grimoire of Souls on Apple Arcade to celebrate the lore of the franchise. But we know that our fans always want more, and we do too," end quote. Hence why the Dead Cells DLC made some sense. Castlevania, which began back in Japan in 1986 and was long considered one of Konami's most important franchise, has been dormant for nearly a decade, and in reality, it hasn't received a true entry in more than 15 years. The last 3 games, all from Mercury Steam and the Lords of Shadow subseries, released between 2010 and 2014, and they ran the gamut from surprisingly good to surprisingly bad. And the days of the Metroidvania Castlevania game have elapsed even longer. 2008's Order of Ecclesia on DS is widely considered the last real Castlevania game, though there was a seldom played remake of Game Boy's Castlevania The Adventure from 1989, which came to WiiWare in 2009. I remember that very well. I think that might be the last WiiWare game I ever bought. Actually, that's not true. I think I bought... No, Mega Man 9 and 10 would have been after that. Anyway, I know you guys aren't big Castlevania fans, but this is exciting news. When I saw that, and it was funny listening to people kind of speculate, Zircon, Project Zircon, I'm like, that's Castlevania. And I know people identified that immediately, but I was like, it's really not nebulous. That's definitely a Castlevania game.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah,
Dustin. I'm sorry, Chris. No, please.
Well,
any thoughts?
Well, I just want to say because I really liked Dead Cells a lot back when I played it pretty regularly. I fell off. I can't remember why, but that Castlevania DLC looks awesome.
It does.
Like I've heard nothing but good things about it, so I've actually been tempted to kind of, and especially just because it's such an approachable. Dead Cells isn't exactly like, like a 70-hour JRPG. It's like a very approachable game, so I'm like, I think I could probably squeeze in some of this DLC if it's
cool. People have been trying to encourage me to play it. I just don't. Dead Cells is cool. It's just I don't want a half Castlevania game. I want a Castlevania game. That's why I think Project Zircon is exciting. It's like I don't need to see a game dress up as Castlevania. I think that's cool, but I don't want any half measures. And Dustin, this is what I was wondering, and you could talk about this however you want, but let's get Motion Twin to make a Castlevania game. I mean, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
They were interested in doing this. They approached Konami, right? So I would have been like, fuck Dead Cells. Here's $20 million. Go make a fucking Castlevania game.
Yeah.
Like a beautiful 2D Castlevania game that will sell millions of copies.
Might still happen. There's time.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. Dustin, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm looking at the trailer for. I've seen the trailer before, but it is actually more Castlevania than I would have expected. But
Yeah.
I wonder what direction they'll take with it, whether they want to do a traditional 2D style Castlevania game, which I think would be awesome, or if they want to try to do something more modern. I mean, obviously the dream after Bloodborne was for From Software to make a Castlevania game, which I still think would be so sick. I don't think that will ever happen, but you might imagine that they are looking at options like that as well, as far as something that's not 2D. So I think that's my biggest question.
Yeah, I'm looking at the trailer too. I've seen it. It's beautiful, but and by looking at it, it seems like maybe a remake in some way of the first game. I don't know, which is 6 stages. I don't know how exactly they did it. And it's beautiful. I love the art at the end. I love the castle in Castlevania, like all the impossible turrets and all the architecture is fucking awesome. It's some of my favorite stuff in all video games, but just do it. Do it. What the fuck are you doing?
No.
You know how many studios out there would make a Castlevania game? There are probably 10 studios. I can rattle off 10 teams right now that would make great Castlevania games in 2D or 3D. I mean, Indie Creates making a Castlevania game, Way Forward making a Castlevania game, Yacht Club making a Castlevania game. If I were Konami, I would have thrown money at these teams a long time ago. And if you want to go into 3D, which I think Castlevania does belong in as well, the sky's the limit as far as that's concerned. And I think that's what this Project Zircon probably is a 3D Castlevania game. You know, but do I want more Symphony of the Night? Yes. Are we going to get more of that style game? Yes, from Iga when Bloodstained 2 comes out. But I'm super stoked about this, and I don't know, man. Konami's so frustrating because it's like what this is an audacious thing to say, but it's like what Dagan and I say where on Knockback, where it's like we are positive we could have written a better Star Wars movie than The Last Jedi. Like if you put us into a room and like told us to, maybe we wouldn't be able to construct it, like the dialogue and all the rest, but we could make a treatment for a Star Wars movie that was way better than that. I'm positive of that. And I feel like with Konami and Castlevania, it's like, and I feel this way about Mega Man too. It's like, dude, just give me the keys. Give me, like, even just let me find the team and find the right matchup. I know Castlevania so intimately. How can you guys not find anyone? How can no one out there get it? How can you not understand it? Especially with the Netflix show and all of this. There are people that live and breathe this kind of shit that can make the coolest Castlevania game you've ever seen. And I don't understand why you're not doing it. And so hopefully this is a sign of things to come. And I feel that way, by the way, about Contra and other things too. Dude, you have any idea how cool a AAA Contra game could be? Do you have any idea what they could do with that IP? That would both invoke those old games and do something new and exciting. And it's like you're just not doing it. You're not doing anything. And it's frustrating. And I don't care so much about Bomberman and all these other things, but I do care about Castlevania. And it's bothering me that they're just sticking with it and doing these. It's cool. It's cool what they've done with Motion Twin, but I don't know, man. It's where is the Castlevania? Where is the Mega Man? That's for Capcom.
Yeah. It's a very frustrating feeling to understand something very, very intimately, and then just like the people in charge is like, who's working here? If not people who understand.
It's like play Bloodborne's first 45 minutes. I mean, that's Castlevania in 3D, and
maybe give you a whip.
Yeah, I guess the point I'm making is that Castlevania is really cool because of the world, the monsters, the setting, all of that. You don't even have to try that hard. All you need is like some great artists. You don't even need to, and that's why From, I think, is a great team to do a Castlevania game, because they don't really write stories. It's more about the intonation and the between the lines kind of stuff, and they would do that wonderfully. Castlevania is perfect for that kind of storytelling. You don't need to have Alucard with finding fucking audio diaries. You know?
Yeah.
Maybe he will. I don't know. Maybe he will find audio diaries. I don't know. But that's not the way I envision it. And by the way, if you've not played Symphony of the Night for some reason out there, it's available on PS4. It has been for years now. You got to correct that. It's one of the best games of all time. And many would argue the greatest 2D game ever. And so beautiful.
I just got it
beautiful.
On disc.
Did you get the original or the green one?
No, I got the original, dude.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was my second PS1 game I ever bought. I mowed a bunch of lawns. I didn't know anything about it. I saw like a mock box, because the box art sucks for Symphony of the Night. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's
Is it
horrible.
really?
I mean, it's
I don't remember
totally hard. It's the worst, considering Castlevania's box art back on the NES and SNES and Genesis and all that, where it had the best, and N64 had the best box art. Some of the great. So the box art for Symphony of the Night was awful.
What's wrong
But I
with
didn't
it?
know what it. I didn't know what it was.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a moon, right?
oh, yeah. No, I see. It's just the
It's
castle.
the castle.
Okay, yeah. I'm looking at a different one where it's like a black and white, kind of like Alucard or
Let
something.
me see
that
here
looks
if I'm
pretty
remembering this right.
But no, you're
The
right.
Japanese cover is sick.
Is that the Japanese cover with the black
The
and white?
Japanese cover has
this is-
like a really nice illustration. Of
Yeah.
Alucard
This is
on
the
it.
box art I'm thinking of. Yeah, this box art sucks.
Yeah, no, that's
It doesn't even look like the right castle. It looks like a fucking cathedral. You know?
Yeah.
It's like not even the
It
it's
does.
not even
It's
it's
not
not
even
the
the
castle. Like
It's not even the same. It's a poorly matted out moon that's above the clouds.
dude, now look at do you guys know the original Castlevania box art?
Yeah,
Like look that box art is
yeah.
iconic. Yeah, this is great. This Japanese
Dude, the
box art.
Japanese
with
cover,
Alucard.
Chris, I put the link in the chat.
yeah, that's the one that
Why
I'm
do they have to
seeing,
change things?
yeah. I think that's the one on every digital version of it as well.
Probably.
Because I have,
And it's
I
got
have
the right it's got the right castle in the background,
Yeah.
not a cathedral.
Well, there was a weird thing in that era where they felt the need to Americanize different box arts. For example, I'm putting another link in the chat. The Suikoden 1
Can you
box
overlay
art.
these into the video version?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, thanks.
The Suikoden 1
Oh yeah, I
box
remember this.
art.
Awful.
What is going on there? You look at the game and the portraits in the game, no one looks like that. It's like I don't.
Well, dude, this
It's
is from
weird.
the era. This is from the era where people would do these paintings for these box art, often with no information or very little information. Like I saw a video. It's awesome. I got to share it with you guys at some time with the guy that made the Mega Man 2 box art, which is famous. It's not the bad box art for Mega Man 1, but it's the box art where it's like, what the fuck is this version of Mega Man? Like it's not robotic or anything. And the guy told the story about how he was basically flown to Capcom, shown like 4 screenshots, and then like, okay, there you go. You got to, and so he made this world of Mega Man up in his mind, and that's the Mega Man 2 box art, and it's probably not very different for the Suikoden thing. It was only a few years later, basically. So they were probably like, here's this game, here are a few screenshots and assets. We're going to tell you about it. Our PR guys going to tell you about it. Paint us a little something.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and they did
the
that.
Japanese box art's just fine. That's the thing, is they actually use the in-game assets, or at least reference those and the way they look.
Right. That's the same with Mega Man 2.
yeah.
Mega Man 2's
Like,
box
God
art's
forbid
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God forbid it looks
Or Rockman,
Japanese.
too. Rockman. Exactly.
Yes.
And that's what's so
Yeah.
funny is that aesthetic would be huge today. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, because Rockman's box art in Japan, they were all awesome. It was always the faces of the bad guys in like an arc. And then you would have like Mega Man in the middle. And the box art here was horrible. There was probably no good Mega Man box art until like really good Mega Man box art until maybe 5 and 6. I mean, because he in 3 he doesn't look right. In 4 he still doesn't look right. I don't know.
They're
didn't
so
give a flying
funny though.
fuck. Let's be
They're
honest.
so iconically bad though. I love them.
Oh, the
like, that
first
is
one
so
is
funny.
the first one's amazing. You know,
The first one is so.
yeah. Put those up too if you can for the fans. The Mega Man 1 and 2 box art.
It's just too good. It's too good. He just looks so goddamn stupid. I can't look at this anymore.
Yeah, but it's a shame because then I'm trying to. We're going into this now, but it's like I don't know if this is gonna work here.
Maybe that's the thumbnail. Maybe I'll put Colin's face in the Mega Man 1 box art.
Yeah,
I'm going
do
to do that either way.
do it.
We'll see.
Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna work. Sorry, this is not good radio.
It's not good radio.
But yeah, I wanted to show you guys this. Like, this is like Mega Man 10's. It's a digital game, but like that's how cool the key art is.
Yeah.
That's fucking dope. Like that art is dope. And it shows all the enemies and like it's the Mega Man art style, not fucking whatever.
I want to see a
that's
live action Mega Man.
Oh my god,
That's what I want to see.
I don't know that you want to see that.
Oh.
Dude, I have such a good idea for a Mega Man game. Like I think the one is coming. I think a 3D Mega Man game is coming. I think it's going to be like a AAA game. I don't have any hard and fast rumors on that. I just think that is like I think that's the idea, is to bring Onimusha, Mega Man, a few of these things back in like a big way. And man, to creative direct or even just write a Mega Man game would be so cool, because I think I could do it. I know I could do it. And that's why I brought up that Star Wars thing earlier. It's like, that's my level of confidence in being able to do it, but it's never going to happen. God damn it. All right, let's move on. This one's just a one I wanted to read real quick. We don't have to sound off on this too much, but number 4. As the Chinese games industry grows in power, prestige, and revenue, so too do calls from the Chinese government to regulate these games, not only for the sake of children and addiction and all the rest, but in message, story, character, and more too. As we noted on this show with regularity, doing business with communist China comes at a cost, because while American and other Western societies are generally free, China is anything but. And according to newspaper South China Morning Post, the Chinese games industry is consolidating to regulate itself, much like the American games industry did 3 decades ago with the creation of the ESRB, which was done under the threat of government itself getting involved with games. But while the ESRB and similar agencies around the world have predictable and realistic rules concerning violence, sexuality, gambling, and more in games, the Chinese companies have a bit of a different idea. The story reads in part, quote, China's Video Game Industry Association has drafted a new self-discipline guideline for the industry with do's and don'ts for the distribution and promotion of games, ellipsis. The draft was co-written by over a dozen Chinese gaming and tech companies, including Tencent, end quote, a response to a call from the Chinese government in 2021 for tighter regulation, according to the newspaper. Quote, the rules will help to address problems such as counterfeiting, copyright disputes, gaming addiction, excessive consumption, and user violations, according to the association. Under the rules, a game must meet 11 requirements in terms of content before distribution, including no leaks of state secrets, endangering national security, or damaging national honor or interests, and must not promote obscenity, pornography, gambling, violence, or aid in crime. Adverts for games must also be in line with the requirements of building the so-called socialist spiritual civilization, end quote. As noted, the self-regulation comes from a call hailing back from 2021 when, quote, the Video Gaming Industry Association in China and 213 video gaming companies, including Tencent and NetEase, signed a self-regulation pact committing them to banning the kind of content frowned on by Chinese authorities, including content deemed politically harmful or historically nihilistic, end quote. It's important to note that as a Hong Kong-based newspaper, South China Morning Post isn't even allowed to be published or read within China. And this entire story matters because in China, historical truth itself is illegal, nonetheless a whole host of other so-called crimes. So don't expect to get the games we get from China to say anything real anytime soon. I wanted to just note this. We don't have to get deep into it, but I really lamented seeing this. This sucks because it means we're never going to see the true impact of a Chinese game because they're never going to be able to tell a true or real story. And so we're going to be limited to this very anime light style, very action oriented, no violence, no plot, no governments, no anything like that. And this is a society of 1+ billion people bursting at the seams, probably with stories and ideas and games that they're not going to be able to execute on. And I just wanted to lament that here on the show. I'm sure that's not going to be reported in very many places, but I saw it and I wanted to relay it because what it means is, think about it this way, and Dustin, I'll throw it over to you if you have anything you want to add, but the reason that Apple iPhones are going to USB-C is because they were sued and forced to do so in Europe. And it's cheaper for Apple to just change the format for everyone than to have regional formats, right? So now we're all going to have this trickle down of USB-C, which is great. But when you have a game coming out of China, obviously it's going to be impaired, but think about a game going into China. Is it going to be impaired in a way that makes it serviceable there or sellable there? And the answer is yes. And I've said it before, like we had to change the cookbook in Super Perils of Baking to remove a Taiwanese reference, or we could not release the game. And it wasn't because we were trying to release the game in China. It's because these entities want to do business in China. And that level, and we saw that with Arc System Works. That was the original canary in the coal mine when they were editing Arc System, or they were editing Guilty Gear lore to remove references to China and just removing it completely. And I worry about this in terms of what it means because 1+ billion people, a rising economy, increasingly wealthy by whatever standard, population that has more money to spend, you're going to want to breach that market. What will you do to do that? What will you sacrifice? I think if you dangle money in front of a lot of people, they'll do whatever the wrong thing is. I think if you dangle the money in front of some people, they won't change. And people could say like, well, why did you change your game? It's like, well, because we're an indie developer of 2 people. And we can either not release our game or just remove one line from an ancillary cookbook in our game. But if that happened to us, imagine the strong arming that's going to happen to other entities that are telling bigger and more powerful stories. And so, Dustin, I'll throw it over to you if you have anything to add. But I felt like this needed to be reported and discussed on this show, not again to call out China individually or Chinese people individually, but to call out a communist system that's going to demand products and how they'll be edited to fit within that system, very much like the iPhone is now going to be edited to fit within Europe.
Yeah. I'll keep it short and sweet. That's my main concern as well. And you already see, and I think we talked about on the show, how it affected and still continues to affect the film industry. And so it's just kind of getting started. And as video games, I mean, already are so very popular, but as you said, they need to, or especially in a era where games, it's an imperative, a fiduciary duty to make as much money as possible, that China will become an essential market. And so things will be edited potentially for just that market, but I think in some cases just made censored for the world. And that sucks.
Yeah. And I think I lament, there's all these possibilities, but what I lament the most is just that the foregone conclusion that we're not going to get anything cool out of China as far from for a while in terms of, apart from these baseline MMOs and all these things that people love, but nothing substantive is ever going to come out of there with those kinds of rules. Violence?
That's crazy.
What does that mean? I mean, what does that mean? Yeah, Chris, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I would say that my concern is the main one that you guys have kind of addressed, and it's how it's going to affect the stuff that we play here, made here. Because I mean, you brought up the film industry a little bit, and I feel like Star Wars is one of the biggest examples of this, where, you know, you had this is a conspiracy theory in some ways. Like I don't know if I've seen all that much hard evidence to support this, but I believe it. And you know, The Force Awakens, I believe, was supposed to be about Finn, and I believe that movie was supposed to be about this black stormtrooper. And I think he was going to be the main character. And I think they realized that wasn't going to go over well in China. And they kind of just cobbled together this reskin of the first Star Wars movie in a way to kind of, dude, the early market, he's the first character you meet in that movie. Like all the signs of that movie show like like heavy rewrites. And I think a lot of that is because China is big into this stuff, like way more than we are. And you know, the fact that they edited him out of at like really, they made him real small on Chinese posters and stuff. Just like it's concerning, because it's one thing for, you know, games coming out of that region to you know, abide by certain rules, and that is upsetting as well. But at least it's a little bit more, I don't know, you can rationalize that a little bit more. But like, the idea that it would affect things coming out of America and the final product that we get to play, because they're not going to make two different versions of the same game.
No,
that's insanely expensive. They're going to go with they're going to make whatever version is accepted in the most places. And unfortunately, China is such a big market that is the bar that they're going to have to clear. And it's unfortunate how that's going to affect us and the stuff that we make over here. It's the biggest problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's well said. There's nothing else to really be said about it. I think we have to continue to confront the tension that exists here. It's important, you know, even though we can't live economically moral lives, and there is no fair consumption under capitalism, as they say, or ethical consumption. But to me, it's just a shame. It's like an ancient society with incredible ingrained creativity in their society, with this long history of storytelling, this long history of political intrigue. Dude, Romance of the Three Kingdoms? Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, that is like, a lot of people consider that like the first true, what you would consider like a novel or series or something like that. You know, and it's a bummer that they're just all contained within this iron curtain, as it were, where they can't truly express anything out of bounds. And that's a loss to the world.
Yeah,
they can do whatever they want. It's up to them to overcome the system. But that to me is just a shame. And so I lament the things that I'm saying that word a lot, that we're sending games over there that are going to be edited. But I also am sad for what we're not getting or not going to get. And the longer, it's like how I feel. This is a weird example, but it's how I feel about the baseball lack of a salary cap and how it broke baseball. And the longer you go and don't fix that and put a salary cap on there, the longer it's going to take to be fixed, right? So it's not only, in other words, it's not only that China can't do it or Chinese developers can't do it now. If it's ever fixed, then we have to wait even that much longer for any meaningful product to come out of there. And it's a bummer. All right, finally, number 5. A couple of weeks ago on this very show, we were complaining about the relatively weak PlayStation Plus Essential offerings for the month of March, and they are, but perhaps the next batch of games available for the other 2 PlayStation Plus tiers, Premium and Extra, will make up for it. For subscribers to both the mid and high tier of PS Plus, here's what you have to look forward to as of March 21st when it comes to games entering the service. First, foremost, and most importantly, is the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection for PS5, which includes remastered versions of 2016's Uncharted 4: A Thief's End I said from 2016 twice, as well as its expansion Lost Legacy from 2017. The much promoted adventure game Chia is also coming to the service and will actually launch on PS Plus in addition to a la carte on both PS4 and PS5. The dubious 2022 Ubisoft shooter Rainbow Six Extraction will also be included on both PS4 and PS5, while on PS5 only comes Tango Gameworks' 2022 open world game Ghostwire Tokyo, which is also coming to Game Pass, so Sony has nothing to lose there. Also coming to both consoles via PS Plus Extra and Premium are 2 Life is Strange games, Life is Strange 2 from 2019 and Life is Strange True Colors from 2021. Ubisoft provides PS5 launch window game Immortals Phoenix Rising from 2020, also on PS4, while Bandai Namco offers up PS4 fighter Dragon Ball Z Kakarot from 2020. In preparation for Street Fighter 6, Capcom will provide 2020 fighting game Street Fighter 5 Champion Edition on PS4, the follow-up to the 2016 original. Bizarre 2019 puzzler Untitled Goose Game is also coming, as is 2015 Square Enix PS4 release Final Fantasy Type 0 HD. I think is it Type 0 or Type O? I never really knew.
I always thought it was Type 0.
Well, it is literally a 0.
Yeah.
Like as opposed to an O, but I feel like I know the answer. I literally played this game in their studio in Japan, and I am embarrassed that I don't remember the answer. So Type 0, I'm going to say. A remaster of the PSP game by the same name, which launched only in Japan in 2011. Square Enix also offers up Neo: The World Ends With You, the 2021 PS4 sequel to the 2007 Nintendo DS original. From id Software and publisher Bethesda comes the 2019 FPS Rage 2. No, actually, that's not id Software. That's Avalanche. Why did I say that?
They partnered with them.
Oh, right. That's right.
Yeah. id Software, that was always the debate on how much they actually
Right.
But.
Yeah, it's let's say Avalanche in it. And yes, there are a trio of new PlayStation classics for PlayStation Premium members too, with a la carte availability for these games unknown. First up is the 1999 Western PS1 racer Ridge Racer Type 4. Second up is the Siphon Filter game Dark Mirror via Bend Studio, which came to PSP in 2006 and PS2 in 2007. This is specifically the PSP version. Most importantly here is no doubt Ape Academy 2, a launch window game for PSP in Japan that came to Europe and Australia in 2006, but never saw an American release until now. So that will be an interesting one as well. Great month, I think, for PlayStation Plus, Premium and Extra. Not that I am a member of either of those things. Dustin, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a great month as well. And I think that if you're not as hardcore into buying all your games and you haven't been into this hobby as long, it's a no-brainer, I think, to get the extra tier for sure. My friend Jason, who recently bought a PlayStation 5, he doesn't have any games. I was like, dude, you should absolutely get the extra tier. You'll be set with that. It's not quite as advantageous for people like us who just buy all the games they want as they come out, but I think it's great that it really does have an excellent library for people to dive into. As far as these classic games, I think we got to cut it out with the Siphon Filter.
Yeah, they're doing all the Siphon Filter games. Yeah, they're getting them all out.
I
There's
guess
only 2 more left, I think.
Right. So, but again, not great, but not bad. I think Ridge Racer, that's a cool one. I'm curious about this game that never released in the United States, Ape Academy 2. I think this is a interesting door that they can open up as far as releasing games in different regions that never had them before. I remember there's a PlayStation demo disc. I don't remember the name of the game, but on these PlayStation Underground demo discs, they would have the import section where you could try out demos of usually Japanese games. And there was one that was a cooking game that was, I mean, this was way before like Cookie Mama or anything like that. And you had to like chop up onions and make a stew and serve it out. I thought that was so cool. I'm gonna have to look up what that game actually was, but this is a neat idea, bringing over some of that interesting, some of those interesting games that we never saw over here, and getting a chance to check them out.
Yeah, I'm always particularly interested in games that were localized and still not released in North America.
Yeah.
That's the weirder thing to me, especially early in PSP's life cycle when they were really flooding the market with games, and yet they didn't release this one. I'm always interested in that. It's the same thing with Type 0. That game was huge on PSP in Japan, but they were just like, nope. Like there's no one's buying PSP games anymore. So, and they were right, of course. Chris, anything stand out to you before we move on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think it's a good month. I think what strikes me is the variety of it. I feel like there's a lot of different. Obviously, there's like Dragon Ball Fighters. So you've got like this weird RPG fighting game. You got Immortals. Ghostwire being there is awesome because I hope more people give that a shot because I feel like we all feel like that's kind of underrated in some way.
Definitely.
But the thing that stands out to me, honestly, is the fact that there's another siphon filter. Like, I just don't know. I don't know why they're so adamant about this specific. Because these games just don't play all that well. And there's so many first-party games from PlayStation that do, like, from the original PS1 that do play well. And it's kind of baffling to me that they're being omitted in favor of siphon filter. I don't really understand that. But aside from that, it's a pretty good month. I think there's just like a lot of variety here. I feel like if you've not played any of this stuff, you're bound to find something that you like here. You know,
right on. Yeah, keep it up, Sony. This is getting better.
Let's do it.
Still not going to get my money because, like, again, yeah, I'm totally happy buying games as they come. I feel like choice is paralyzing in some way. I feel like if I had access to this thing, I would just be jumping around and not playing anything, and it would just be like just totally
analysis paralysis.
Right.
That's
precisely. All right, my friends, that's it for the news. So let's get into 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience. We always end every episode of Sacred Symbols with audience inquiries. You can send them via the thread that is posted each week on Patreon in the newsfeed at patreon.com/laststandmedia at the $2 level or higher. We appreciate you. Of course, there are 5 different support levels on Patreon, $1 to $25 a month, and they get you different options. $1 gets you in the door, $2 inquiries and Sacred Symbols plus episodes, $5 is early access, and so on. So let's hear from Jonah Sparks. Says, hey gang, I'm new to Sacred Symbols and can honestly say I'm glad to be part of the family. My friends listened to you and talked about you, but I was never really interested, mainly because I didn't have time. My first interaction with you all was the Houston live show, and I got to say I'm hooked now, and I made time to listen to the show. Thank you. He says, my question is about Pragmata. The game was announced back in June of 2020 and got a 2023 release date, but we've heard very little to nothing since. It wasn't even mentioned at the most recent Capcom event. Do we have any idea what this thing is and when it's going to be released? Kind of shocking that we've not heard anything outside of its announcement. Great question, Jonah. Welcome to the community. Thank you for being here. Pragmata. So actually, it's interesting. You're right. It was announced in 2020, but what's even weirder is that it was announced in 2020 with a 2022 release date. And then it was in 2021 where Capcom didn't really show anything new, but they said that the game was going to be launched in 2023. And that's really all we've heard about it since. And all we really have is that kind of introductory trailer. And then there is actually an object on PlayStation. If you go to PlayStation.com, you can find the Pragmata object. And here's what it says. It says, travel to a dystopian near future and explore a unique lunar world coming to PS5 consoles. Lose yourself in a brand new sci-fi action adventure game from Capcom, the creators of Resident Evil and Devil May Cry. Pragmata will present players with a profound story and setting as cutting-edge visuals take full advantage of the next-generation platform features, all made possible by the power of PlayStation 5. And then again, there's that video with the little girl. There are some screenshots from the video. That's all we know. Chris, what's your interest level in Pragmata from Capcom, which promises to maybe be a new big product if it is executed right, but we still have no idea what it is?
Yeah, I mean, my friend Lyle has a saying. It's like, no game, no hype. Those is the rules. And so for me, I'm just looking at this initial concept trailer, which I don't know if it read that way to you guys, but to me, that initial concept trailer read like a come work at our studio type trailer. It didn't really feel like there was any gameplay systems being hinted at or like anything other than setting and kind of tone, I guess, maybe. Even the way that the object is described is a very, very outdated, like no 2023, 2024 game is going to be like with the power of PlayStation 5. That's a very launch window, that's a very launch window blurb. So I don't know. It's a bizarre. It's bizarre that we've seen nothing, and the fact that like nothing has really leaked about it either. I scoured the internet for a hot minute, like looking for just anything about it, and no leaks, no nothing. There's one article from last year about it being Capcom's like answer to Death Stranding, but I don't even know if that was even really something that they said, or it was just like an implication based on the trailer. It seemed more concept than it seemed like more of a concept than something that was indicative of something that existed. And so my feeling is that almost like an Anthem situation where they kind of built the trailer before they really had a game to kind of give an idea of like, oh, so that's what we're making. I feel like that's kind of what happened here. That's like my hunch based on the fact that we've not seen anything. We've not heard anything. We've not even heard anything tangential about release dates or even just like the business side of it for ages. So I'm wondering if this ends up being shovelware or if this ends up just being, I don't know, maybe just not even something that's real. And maybe this is kind of a holdover from other stories that we've seen in the past. Like I don't like to bring this up, but Abandoned was just such a stupid thing that we like really overanalyzed, and a lot of people were like really swept up in. And so whenever I see a trailer like this, where it's like, here's a big concept, here's like weird, here's something you can expect 2022, and then you go 3 years without hearing about it. That's, I don't know. That's like that's a lot of red flags to me. It's like bizarre. I don't know what to make of this other than I would debate the validity of this thing even being real at this point.
Well, I think it's definitely real. It's just, it might not have been at the time any more than a pre-production idea, I think.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
It. Yeah.
Like I feel like it's a very come work at our studio type of trailer. And I don't know if they have really anything. And I would bet like we would hear about it for the first time sometime next year. That's my gut.
Well, we'll see. What's interesting about it is that I always go to Gamatsu for this sort of thing because they just write about everything. They write news stories about everything that happens. So it's a good way to, if people are interested, you can just go gamatsu.com/games and then / whatever game title you can think of. And, or you can just use their search functionality if that doesn't work for you. And you can see like a linear list of a sequential, like chronological, I should say, list of stories as they've come out. And Pragmata has only had 4 hits. So it was announced in June of 2020. And then they released an extended cut trailer in June of 2020. So those things happened within a week of each other. And then there's a sizzle reel that PlayStation 5 launched in January of 2021 that showed Pragmata. So that we have June 2020, June 2020, January 2021. And then finally, the delay for Pragmata was announced in November of 2021. So it's been 18 months or so since we've heard anything about the game. And so it's definitely worth being skeptical about. That said, I feel like it's going to come. The thing, and Dustin, we'll hear from you now, is the thing is that we don't know anything about it. I love Capcom. I also feel like Capcom is in a resurgence right now, no doubt. I think Capcom's getting a lot of things right, no doubt. I personally have quite a bit of confidence that something like this is probably going to be big. I just think they're being careful to not show it until it's ready. And who knows? You know what I was thinking about was, again, using that meme of the bear looking thing when he like looks forward and then he looks to the side, like he doesn't notice what you said or did or whatever. I feel that's probably many developers with the Suicide Squad situation. Like that Suicide Squad trailer, I think probably blew up many notions about what game studios are doing and they need to reimagine what they're doing. So holding your cards close to your chest until you're ready is probably smart. But what are your thoughts here on Pragmata, knowing what little we know about it?
I would imagine that some of this is the situation where Sony was getting ready to launch their console and they're like, please, do you got anything? We just need to show that that there's some long-term stuff, that we've got support from a bunch of different big publishers, particularly Capcom. We would love to have whatever you can give us. And so maybe that was part of it, and that they're like, okay, well, we do have this thing that's in early pre-production. We'll give you a trailer, right? I think that I would imagine that maybe this is something we see next time Sony does a showcase or something like that, which I think, as we talked about last week pretty extensively, definitely this year. When it happens, who knows? But I think that's kind of, they need to say something. It either needs to be there or they need to formally announce another delay, just because they already, it's funny to think that in 2021, when it was supposed to coming out the following year. They delayed it to the year after that. Now we're in that year and we still don't know anything. So this could be something that when they do announce it, hopefully in the absolute best case scenario, it's ready to go. That they've got a release date. Maybe it's later this year, kind of a quicker 4 to 6 month turnaround type thing from when they show it again. Or maybe it's early 2024. But either way, it's time to speak up. I gotta say though, watching this trailer again, I'm into this. I like weird stuff.
Me too.
Anything
that is
concept. Abnormal, that kind of scratches that part of your brain of and I think Death Stranding is totally a fair comparison in that it is so otherworldly that you can't help but wonder what the fuck is going on here. So I'm very curious.
An alternative hypothesis, I think, maybe it could be really cool for them to shadow drop this thing. Like, that would be awesome. Like, because I mean, we saw that was a pretty good call for Hi-Fi Rush, and granted, that's a smaller game, I guess, theoretically. I mean, maybe, I don't know. We don't know what Pragmata is really. We don't know the scale or scope of it, but it would be cool to see PlayStation do something similar. And I feel like the only thing that they could really do that with is something like this. Although I guess it's different because they announced it already. But it would still be cool to have this thing pop up out of nowhere and be like, hey, it's done. I just feel like the industry is not that interesting. And I do feel like they're going to want to, at the very least, hype it up before and hype it up for a while or show it for a while before it's actually out. And I suspect that it's a ways away.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll learn more hopefully this year. It's important to note that it's not a PlayStation only game, so it'll also be coming to Xbox, and we'll see like if it even appears again at a Sony conference or not. My assumption is because it appeared so early, they must have some sort of marketing deal in place for it. All right, let's hear from Midnight, who wrote into us and said, "Greetings, Sacred Bishops. I'm writing today regarding the commentary that I've heard in the past, as well as last week's Sacred Symbols about Starfield and 60 frames per second. And what I believe is a fallacy of thinking, or as you would say, missing the forest for the trees. To say that Horizon is beautiful and they hit 60 frames per second, so why can't Starfield, is just not an apt comparison. Horizon is built in Decima. These other games are built in Unreal. Starfield and other BGS titles are Creation Engine games. Creation Engine is designed to be 100% moddable. Every single line of code is moddable. Almost every item in the game is a separately created, tagged, interactive item. This obviously is going to have a big impact on performance. Bethesda could easily create Starfield or another game in Unreal, and I'm sure it would look better and run at 60 frames, but would that be a Bethesda game? No Unreal game is moddable to the extent that a Bethesda game is, where you get full video games basically created by modders, i.e. Fallout London, Tale of Two Wastelands, Sky Oblivion, etc. I would love 60 frames as well, and I hope that they can deliver it. But if not, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make in order to have those unique worlds and experiences that only BGS games can fully deliver. Very curious what you guys think about this. Because to me, I would imagine modding is, I don't want to say irrelevant compared to the number of copies that they sell of these games, but pretty close. I gotta say it, but I would imagine. How many people are playing Skyrim and modding it? Like, what percentage of people would that be?
I guess percentage of overall players probably not a ton, but like I would imagine, like as a pure numbers game, I would imagine that's pretty high, to be honest. I would imagine, like, I don't know, what would you say, Dustin? Like, that's, I mean,
we can look at the Skyrim. Like, if we search Skyrim,
they do have a community. They do have a community of an abnormally large community of modders. So I think it's less about modding. I see what he's saying here, but I do think there's a level of interactability in Bethesda games that kind of, I understand why it's harder to get those games running at a higher frame rate. Like, I get it. Like, everything's interactable. There's like so much to do. There's a lot of AI at play. I get it. Makes perfect sense to me. Whereas like something like Spider-Man has, or even Horizon has, like a far more limited scope as far as like the overall amount of things that need to collide with each other, that have to have a functioning physics engine and all that. I get it. However, it would just be ideal for them to figure that out, like, because frame rate is important. And you are right that, like, yeah, I don't know if it would be that much of a worthy sacrifice in the short term, but then I guess my opinion would just be, just wait until you can do it then. Just like wait until the hardware is where you need it to be, so that way this thing can come out with the fully interactable world with 60 frames at a minimum. It's not necessarily that like it's one or the other. It's just like you should ideally have both. I understand why that would be harder for them, but it's it's just kind of a deal breaker for me in a lot of ways, especially now that we're just in a generation where so many games, if not the overwhelming majority of them, run at a baseline 60. And again, the difference between these games are fully noted. It doesn't change the fact that it just looks rough next to other ones. And maybe that won't matter to a lot of the people playing. Maybe it comes out at 30 frames per second and it is like still like a 9 out of 10 game. I could see that happening, honestly. If it's like a really, really, really good game, I could see that. But ideally, you wouldn't have to choose.
Right.
Yeah, I think for me, and Dustin, we'll throw it over to you, is I guess what I want to know is do people that want a Bethesda game want a good role-playing game, or do they want a game that is customizable? And if you could have one or the other, which it sounds like you could, then wouldn't you want the good role-playing game, or like the best possible experience playing a role-playing game that you can? And I think this goes into, I'm not saying it's like PS3 printer settings and shit like that, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that play mods and make mods and all of that, but what I'm wondering is that what's most important? Because what it sounds like is what you're saying is that's what's most important. And if that's true, then why doesn't Bethesda just release a Dreams-like RPG Maker toolset? That can't possibly be true, right? It's got to be the game itself that's most important, the world and the characters and the story and all of that. So wouldn't you want to make that the best it could be? That's why we were talking the other week about you can pick up every can and every fucking bullet fragment and all these things. I'm like, yeah, but why? You know, like, why? Because you can, or because that's the way it is? And if that's the way it is, that's totally cool. And if people feel like, yeah, they want this customizing and all that, and they want to justify Bethesda's kind of poor engine work and all of that, that's totally fine if that's what gives you the product that you're looking for. But I was under the assumption that people wanted a great role-playing game, and that everything else was totally secondary. And maybe I'm mistaken. Could be. And that's fine, but I don't know, dude. The creation engine sucks.
It's a rough one.
Yeah. Well, I'm not convinced that Midnight is correct in that the reason why it is not as, or doesn't run as smoothly, is because it's 100% moddable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure maybe that's some aspect, but I think it's what Chris was saying, in that there's just a very different level of interactivity in that world. And that's what you're dealing with, not just a like resolution from the video card. You're dealing with CPU and the processes of the actual world. Like, you can go into a town and kill everybody and it will remember that later. And there's different people that live out their different lives and stuff in the game and have a path they walk and stuff like that. That I think it's more about the simulation of the world than it being 100% moddable. I'm sure that it being moddable might have an effect, but there's plenty of moddable games that it doesn't have that kind of effect. So I'm not sure that Midnight is totally correct in that.
I almost feel like the fact that it's moddable is almost it's almost like a byproduct of the fact that they make their games so interactable in the first place. Because if you have to program things to be that interactable, if you have to program it so like everything is able to be interacted with and you can pick up everything and you can displace everything and the game will remember that, then that in and of itself is its own stream of code. And if that's its own stream of code, that means it's open to alteration. And that's, I think it's almost a reverse kind of chicken and egg situation. I don't think it runs poorly because it's moddable. I think it's almost like the byproducts just sort of lead to that inevitability.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think that, he brings up about Horizon and stuff like that. It's like, I get that. I think that he's right in the fact that the level of interactivity in Horizon is definitely helps it to not have to use that processing power on that. Like, you can't go up in Horizon and go into a village and whack a guy on the head and then have the whole town erupt and try to run away from you while having other people come and try to attack you and you run out. And like those types of systems just don't exist in that game where they do in a game like Starfield. So yeah, that's going to have a material cost on what you're able to do with the processing power you have. So yeah, the modding aspect I don't think is there, like Chris and I have been saying, but it's definitely important though. Colin, we were trying to put numbers on it, and I don't know if this is necessarily, this is just some data, right?
Yeah,
so
let's hit me with it.
On nexusmods.com, which is probably the most popular modding site, the number one mod has there's like an upvote and a downvote system. So a totally optional way to interact with the site, right? Probably tons of people go on, they don't even interact with an upvote or downvote. The top mod is called Sky UI, which adds new UI features to Skyrim. 852,000 upvotes. And so those are users that chose to interact with that element of the site. So we're definitely in the multiple millions, at least on PC. I think a bigger question too is about what the numbers are for people that want that on consoles as well. That was a big thing last generation between Xbox and PlayStation and what they will and won't allow as far as mod support. But it definitely is a big deal. So I think that's worth saying. But again, I don't know if that's necessarily connected to the greater question.
Well, that's great data. I would also, though, when it was Fallout 4, right? That was the differentiated game between, or was Skyrim the first one? Did they allow Skyrim?
It was Fallout 4, and then I think Skyrim Ultimate Edition came later.
Oh, okay. Right.
With mod support, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, because I was going to say, I remember that being a thing, but I don't remember anyone on PlayStation really caring. In fact, I'm pretty sure Fallout 4 sold better on PlayStation than it did on Xbox. So I would, that's the other thing is we have a lot of conflicting data. Also, there are so many millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of copies of Skyrim that have been sold at this point. So I guess that's my only point is I don't begrudge people. I guess that's what I'm saying is, and backing up what I'm saying is that maybe I'm misreading what is important to that audience, because I would think that a high fidelity role-playing game is what you wanted.
Yeah.
And I don't know that's what you're going to get, but we'll see.
Well, I think I think in terms of role-playing games, I think people have maybe different ideas of fidelity. Like you could theoretically have like a game that runs 60 frames per second and it's Starfield, right? And you go into a town and nothing's interactable, and that's theoretically like a very high fidelity experience. But if you're a role-playing person, and if you're like looking for a Bethesda Games kind of experience, and you walk into a town and nothing is interactable, but it runs at a high frame rate, you might even consider that a low fidelity RPG, because like the detail is gone. So I understand it. I just also very vividly remember a mod on the Xbox One version of Fallout 4 that got that game to run at 60 frames per second. And that was a user created mod that figured that out on a console that was like not really so to me, I'm just like, I don't know, there's gotta be a way to do it. Like I just feel like there's gotta be a way to do it. And if not now, then maybe in the future, that's fine. But I'll put it this way. I wouldn't want them to sacrifice any aspect of detail in the environment or in the interactability of their worlds to necessarily appeal to me, to somebody who like has a greater amount of importance on that. But it is still something that I expect, and it's still something that I'm ultimately going to prefer. Like regardless of whether or not I understand where the game designers are coming from, regardless of whether or not I understand the realities of the CPU load and like what differentiates this game from something a little bit more simple and a little bit more streamlined. That's all fair and totally valid, but it doesn't change the fact that I just prefer 60 frames per second, and I probably will just wait until that's possible. And I don't think that's necessarily a fault on anybody for having that preference. I think it makes perfect sense, because why do that if you can just wait to have this exact detailed experience in a higher frame rate? I guess to me that's important, and to like, but like a lot of people, like we talked earlier today about how people intentionally dock down their frame rates when given the option to. So like maybe we are kind of overblowing this a little bit. If that many people are intentionally capping their frame rates at a way lower cap when given the option to, maybe it isn't a big deal. Maybe Todd Howard is probably right. Like maybe people don't care as long as the game is as detailed as they expect it to be, and maybe they got enough detail to figure that, or maybe they have enough data to figure that out.
Also, I think Starfield benefits or will benefit from being slower just generally, and so the frame rate's not going to stick out as much. And it's also important to note that, because it's not like a fucking Twitch shooter, it's not going to be all this kinetic craziness. No. I think it'll probably be fine. at 30 frames. It's also worth noting it's going to be obviously 60 frames or even better on PC. So we're not talking about that. But yeah, it's interesting to know. I'm very curious to see how Starfield does. Like I said, my gut instinct is that this game is so important that it can't be a miss. There's just no way that they're going to let this one slip through their fingers. I just cannot believe it. So I think it's going to be great, but we'll find out. All right. Brian Borlaug wrote in and said, "Hey boys, can we use third-party day one Game Pass releases as an indicator for a game's quality? I don't mean late ports or re-releases like Persona, but brand new games. Seems like a continuing trend of games being just okay, but not great if they release day one on subscriptions like Outriders, Scarlet Nexus, and now Atomic Heart. And I can't imagine Exoprimal will blow anyone away. Are subscriptions where publishers send their A or AA games to die? What do you boys think? As always, appreciate the content you make." We kind of talked about a part of this recently, but part of this that Brian got into that I wanted to go into is the sentence, are subscriptions where publishers send their A or AA games to die? Or just send their double. He doesn't even say that, that's where they send their games. I want to really get down into this. I wonder, like, if we can, I'm sure the audience will have something to say about this and maybe we can put it out to them. But what is the best game to ever come day and date to Game Pass? What is like the most critically acclaimed Game Pass game ever?
Hi-Fi Rush.
Really?
I mean, I would like, based on what I can recall, I would have a hard time imagining that anything is.
I think we got to disqualify it though. I think that we got to look at
it's not third party.
Yeah.
All right, third party.
I sent you guys in the chat a list where you can see all of the day one Game Pass games to release. So my take is that perhaps I think there is a through line where you can see certain situations of games that they took the money because they weren't confident in the release. Stuff like Atomic Heart, Outriders. There was another one that we talked about as well. But there's many examples of games that are absolutely excellent that really didn't need to launch on Game Pass, but did. Wolong recently, very good. Persona 4 Golden didn't need to launch on Game Pass for sure. The TMNT Shredder's Revenge is a game that would have sold without being on Game Pass. So that's why I say perhaps. I think it really depends on a game by game basis. I mean, and I know this is kind of a different category, but Silksong is coming out on Game Pass day one. They absolutely don't need to do that, but they are.
Yeah,
and
the money
be
must be real. You know, who knows?
Yeah, so I think that it is a possibility. I think that in certain situations, for example, like Atomic Heart, I think that is a situation where you see a kind of relatively unknown developer release a game that looks pretty high budget, that almost looks slightly too good to be true, and then you see it's coming out on a Game Pass, then yeah, I think that we have seen that through line a few times. But I think it was on a few weeks ago that I said I made that point that, but I made the point that these games, there's a through line, and so upon further research, I still think that is somewhat true, but not as true as I once said.
Yeah, it's interesting. And looking at this list of games, I mean, there's a lot of good games here, a lot of great games. But I think the biggest one might be like Back 4 Blood. Or
people hate that game.
What'd you say?
People hated that game.
Oh,
that game died.
Oh, I thought that it like just died because it was older. I didn't know that people didn't like it immediately.
No.
And then the Outer Worlds, that came to Game Pass, I guess, immediately before the.
Yeah, but that's. No. That was after the acquisition, was it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's on here. It says it's been these games have been ready for action on Game Pass since day one. So I think it did. So that would have been 2019. So and there are games I like on here, and there are games that I love on here. Chained Echoes is a really great game. Obviously, Outriders was a huge success, but I agree with you. Here's what I'm perplexed about with this is we don't have the paradigm breaking example yet of what we would all consider to be a slam dunk AAA third party game that chooses to go to this place. And I think it's very similar to what happens with Netflix. Like Netflix has a ton of exclusive content, but they pay for it. They make it. They produce it. That's what's necessary. All the other stuff they gleam onto and pay licensing rights to, but that's not the first marriage for either of those products, right? Like when a movie comes to Netflix that was in the theater, that's its second or third marriage, as opposed to these initial marriages. So my concern about Game Pass and why I think it might be where A and double A games go is just because I don't see anyone breaking the mold and saying like, we have to get this money. We got to put our game here. Because here's an important component of this that I never really considered until recently. We brought up Back 4 Blood, right? So that's a great example of a game where you have Back 4 Blood and it's a Warner game, right? So WB money, right? And so even though they can't share that information about how much money they made and how their game did and et cetera and so on there, they know how their game did. So they would make future decisions based on that. But there are no other big WB games that came after that. You know what I mean? So it's not like they're getting loads of repeat customers that say like, this deal is too good to be true for us. We need to get in on this deal. I still think most publishers are going to want to sell their games on a case-by-case basis. So that's my interpretation, is just that. So you're going to get games with low upside and what I think would be considered high downside in the fact that they might just die on the vine completely, if not for Game Pass, and they're getting their money and they're getting what's good. But you don't want your subscription to be known for that. That's why I think it's so important that first and second party gets going, and why Hi-Fi Rush I think is such an important game, but also more importantly, Redfall and then Starfield. And they got to get it going with I think more high quality games than this. Anyway, do you have anything you want to add, Chris, before we move on?
I've been thinking a lot about whether or not, because we saw AA kind of go away for a while. I think we saw this at the beginning of maybe the PS4 and the Xbox One generation, where like it was pretty much all you really had was AAA and indie, and that was kind of it for a while. And then you started to see this kind of increase in AA as the generation went on. And I almost wonder, and it's, by the way, remained pretty consistent. Like we're getting a pretty healthy amount of AA titles. And I wonder if subscription services are almost kind of the reason why that happened. Because you kind of have these studios who are able to now maybe put down it's still a lot of money, but like a less demanding amount of money to make something that might be like a little bit risky, but it's not that huge of a risk because they're not blowing like hundreds of millions of dollars on it. And then if it sells, if it sells well or if it sells poorly or whatever the outcome is, you're going to have a subscription service looking for it because subscription services thrive on content. And I think maybe it seems like a very possible reality where the resurgence of AA games is largely being subsidized by the necessity of subscription services to have a consistent drip feed of content. And if you didn't have AA games, like maybe you wouldn't have such robust subscription services. And I wonder if that's happening, or if that's salient at all.
It makes me wonder to that point. Microsoft feels like with this Activision deal, for instance, that they want Call of Duty, they want all these things, which makes perfect sense, of course. But you would think that the publisher that might be most interesting to them would actually be Embracer. Because if you just need churn, like new shit all the time, then that might be the team. Those might be the teams that you go invest in it. And it's, to your point, low downside, low upside, because no one's going to really buy these games anyway. So because Embracer to me is going to be in trouble, as I keep saying. I just think that they're just not long for this world in their current form, that there's going to be some truncation there because their games can't possibly sell. But if you marry a pipeline like that to a subscription service, it might be a different story entirely. I'll continue to be interested to see, like, we still don't have that true AAA game, which to me indicates everyone knows where money's actually made in the industry still. And yeah, Atomic Hearts is a good representation of those kinds of games, but there's no disrespect to that. I loved Nobody Saves the World. I thought Outriders was awesome. I thought Tunic was pretty cool. They're not missing. It's just, that's not very impressive to me either. And I have no problem buying those games. It's like you said, Dustin, about TMNT. It's like, I have no problem buying this. None.
I think the only part of the question that I have an issue with is the idea that it's where AA games go to die. And I would argue it's just where AA games go to survive as best they can.
Well, that's what he said. He said he does say that, to be fair. He does say our subscriptions where publishers send their A or AA games. So I tried to correct that earlier, that I didn't mean to indicate that.
Oh, okay.
Although that does seem to be his notion. But but it's just where they're sending their games, period. Yeah, I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Matthew Terriel wrote in and said, I think I'm saying that right. Said, howdy, y'all. I've been listening since podcast Beyond 150, but this is my first time writing in. Thank you. What would you consider to be the primary taxonomical divide in video games? Are the two main branches single player versus multiplayer focused games? Are they gameplay driven games versus story driven games? Are they paid versus freemium? AAA versus indie? Or some other dichotomy altogether? I love this question. Because it's interesting when you think back about, if you guys think about the tree of life, right? And the taxonomy of where things come from. The beginning of the tree of video games probably begins with Space War or something like that, like a mainframe game that was played on punch cards. But really, we would probably identify Pong as some sort of origin point, and then there would be some sort of parallel branch of pinball, I think, that never connects but runs parallel for a moment. And then you go down there from there, and I think actually the breakdown might be PC and console, and then or hardware, arcade, console, PC, and then input or player count. I don't know. It would be very, very interesting to see how that all worked, because then eventually it would split, I think, into genres and all the rest. It would be quite complicated. But yeah, I see the tree beginning with Space War, like a 50s game like that, and then into the 60s with more complicated mainframe games. Like there was a Star Trek mainframe game and stuff like that people made, like an unofficial one. And then in the 70s, when you finally get to Pong and finally get to what we would understand as an arcade game. I think that's where it begins. Dustin, how would you break it down?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I understand the question correctly. I had a thought, but if you tell me if I'm off base here, just thinking about like what is the basic question is, what is the biggest divide in gaming, right?
Well, no, he's saying the taxonomy, like the...
I don't know what I did. I don't know what that word
so
means,
like think about
to be honest.
Like how you would categorize things. So like if you see the tree, like I said, the tree of life, or like the evolutionary branch of something, it's like the way that it's all, how it all splits off and why it all splits off and what splits it off. So like, insects split off from these primitive bugs, right? And from there splits off winged insects and land insects and all of these different things. So what he's saying is like what is the first breakdown from the first game? Like how does it break down the first time? And so I would say that's what I'm reading into it. Yeah. Like how would you fundamentally begin to divide them from as differentiated from each other? And I would say that it would probably be the way you play them: arcade, console, PC. Because you would get arcade first and then a console a little bit later and then PC a little bit later. And that would be the initial breakdown, And
I would say that console is eventually what really killed arcade. I mean, there's other reasons too, but why go spend money to play individual games when you can buy a game and then have it forever?
Well, right. Like and that's why that branch would like wither into nothing. And the console branch would continue down to today with a bunch of different things splitting off of it. And that's what he's saying. So,
I
don't know if you have anything you want to say about that, but sorry to confuse you.
No, that's good. My perspective, like as far as the biggest divide in gaming, I was going to say like the hardcore versus the non-hardcore, and how there's people that are, play a lot of games, but they play 3 games a year and they're not totally there are millions and millions of people that are totally disconnected from what we talk about on this show, and they are the primary market, not us.
Yeah. That would be the taxonomy of the player. I think you're on to something there, but that would be not the product, but like the audience. Yeah. Exactly. What do you think, Chris?
This is an interesting question, because like I feel like he does say primary. I don't necessarily interpret that as like the first, but like the biggest, most relevant. And I would almost feel like, I don't know, this would depend on this would be such an interesting thing to look into or research or like survey people on, because I am actually curious about this. But like for me, I know, like in my experience, or a lens that I would kind of like look at this from, is almost like I'm not sure if these are necessarily the right words to use, but almost the divide between games almost as like a kinetic interactable experience versus games as a narrative. And what I mean by that is something like the divide between something like Detroit Become Human and Rocket League. As fundamentally very, very different games that I would argue someone who is very, very into one arguably probably wouldn't be into the other, or at least generally. And I feel like there's probably a lot of those. Like I think maybe kart racers versus, something like or even something like maybe Elden Ring, which is like a lot more gameplay driven and a lot more like experience driven, a lot more like, hey, like look at what I can do. Look at what I can impose upon the world by nature of my avatar and my input versus look at this narrative that's being kind of transposed to me through this interactive medium that really only exists as a way to deliver that narrative to me. Or at least that was the first thought that I had that I started like kind of chewing on. I think that's a fundamental. Those are two fundamental different styles of game design. Like, I think about something like Doom, which is, very much based on like, oh, we want to make the player feel like a badass and we want to have like momentum and kinetic movement. And this system feeds into that subsystem and it leads into this fun rhythm dance. Whereas something like The Last of Us isn't necessarily thinking about the rhythm in that way. They're thinking about like the ambience and the world and like character interactions and stuff like that. I don't know. That's what I'm kind of chewing on when I read the question. But I think it's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is.
I feel like there's so many different places where you can start, and there's so many different lenses to look at it from. Like I think the taxonomy of the player is an interesting one by itself. That's cool.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. It's not quite as easy as like the taxonomical breakdown of this is where this fungus comes from, or this is how humans evolved,
the origin
or whatever.
Of species.
Yeah, it's like you're looking at different perspectives of a product and how you interact with it, and then how that all breaks down. Because there's even a genre, like the taxonomy of genre is not the taxonomy of video games, which is not the taxonomy of the player, and so on and so forth. And genre is really the one that's most interesting to me.
Yeah,
and how influential very specific things like Lord of the Rings.
Think about Minecraft.
Was Minecraft is well. What about it?
Just that we had survival games and crafting games before that. But then you introduce something like Minecraft and you have a million types of games that deal with this. Like you're building a base, you're keeping your character fed, you're getting wood and a stone and making an axe. You know what I mean? Like,
right. And that all comes, and the taxonomy of that would be like The Sims and Second Life and, Tamagotchi and all that kind of stuff that would lead into Minecraft, And Minecraft would be like one of those culminative places on a taxonomical chart where everything, like a lot of things culminate and then it breaks out again.
Yeah.
And very much like Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, all that kind of stuff. Anyway.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
I think Wolfenstein is one of those too, like Wolfenstein and Doom. There's that's a big branch off there.
Yeah. Wolfenstein is its own, like Wolfenstein breaks, there are first person 3D games where like that first nub would branch off. And then there would be a big node for Wolfenstein, and actually a smaller one for Doom, I think. But like Wolfenstein would be the big node of play in genre, and you can even use that in perspective. It's good shit, man. I think we need more smart people in games that deal with this stuff, and unfortunately, we just don't have that many smart people in video games. All right. Jordan Fugati wrote in and said, "Hey CDC, what is your perfect length for a video game? I'm finishing up Hogwarts Legacy, and while I've had a great time, I'm ready to move on as it really seems to be dragging near the end. I know there are a lot of variables to consider when answering this question, but I'm curious to hear the usual sweet spot is for each of the proverbial Sacred Symbols trio. Keep up the great work, being the best video game podcast out there. Thank you, Jordan." I'll say this. Obviously, like you said, Jordan, there are different answers to this. When I play a game like Gone Home, I think 90 minutes was perfect. When I play a game like Dragon Quest 11, I think 100 hours is a little excessive, but I understand it. But I have to say the perfect length, I'm going to throw out 20 hours. That to me is the perfect length of a game that I care about. So I'm not talking about a side scroller that's going to be beaten quickly or a walking simulator. I'm talking about an action game, some sort of narrative driven game. And I think of Dead Space, which was even shorter than that, as being pretty perfect. And I think of The Last of Us Part 2, though one of the greatest games of all time, in my opinion, too long. And so I really look at 20 hours as being a very solid AAA third or first person experience, in my opinion. What do you think, Chris?
I agree with that very, very much. Like for me, it's like 15 to 20. 15 to 20 is like a prime. Okay, and I thought of Dead Space while reading this question because it's just like Dead Space felt so perfect. And I've talked about this a lot on recent podcasts, just the pacing of games around that time for whatever reason. And I've been playing a lot of old games from like 2008 to 2011 ish. The pacing of those games just feel really good. Like they feel really accurately paced. They don't drag on for too long. They feel like they give you just enough. They leave you wanting more, but not in like a negative way. And I do feel like a lot of games lately have dragged on a little bit too long. Even some of my favorite ones, even some of the ones that I really, really adore, things like Death Stranding and Red Dead Redemption 2, both like, you know, on the echelon of masterpiece to me. But they both like really drag. Red Dead Redemption is a little bit less guilty because it's a whole very specific reason why that game drags, and I think it's a little bit more forgivable. But you know, Death Stranding has you. Spoilers for Death Stranding. You at the end of that game for no real reason, like, and it's kind of annoying. And I was just thinking, like, man, I was loving it up until then. I still love it, but it'd be a lot better without this part. So I would say, like, yeah, 15 to 20. Obviously, that depends on, like, an RPG, I would like to be, like, closer to 20, 25, something like that. But the second you're approaching 30 hours, I think it's like, all right, you better be doing something amazing. And even then, like, I can't help but think, like, where do you get off? Like, where do you get off? There's very
both
rare
literally
instances.
and figuratively, like, where do you get off doing this, and where do I get off of this ride?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like it's there, and there are some things I will admit, like there are games that keep me hooked for way longer than that. Like Elden Ring got me for a good 80 hours, and that shocked me to my core. I couldn't believe I played that game for so long. So you know, it ebbs and flows, but generally, if I'm picking up a new game and I can finish it and really chew on it and really get like something out of it in 15 to 20 hours, that's an A+ in my book. Just for being able to accomplish that alone. And Dead Space was one of those.
Yeah, Dead Space is a great example. And I actually thought, not a lot of people played it, but that game Evil West that I played, that I platinumed recently, was also a really good length. Like, it was just fun. It was just like a game to play. By the way, Dustin, and we'll go to you now. I will say that I think Chris flagrantly spoiled Death Stranding. So I want you to go back. We'll leave this all in, but I want you to go back and just, when he says, and at the end of Death Stranding, and then I just want you to beep it like he said something incredibly racist. You know?
Yeah, Death Stranding.
Is it really that much of a spoiler? I mean,
I think so.
Know that.
I would think that. Do you think that's a spoiler, Dustin? I think that's a pretty substantial spoiler, actually, in my opinion.
All right,
maybe not. I don't know.
I'm in the middle. I'm not sure.
Well, let's err on the side of caution.
Bleep it anyway for comedic effect.
Yeah, exactly. Let's err on the side of caution. I'd hate to spoil it for anyone. It's I care about that game too much. All right,
that's fair.
Dustin, let's hear from you. Perfect game length.
Yeah, this is I think very to be clear that this is so personal, and it also is so depending on the game, as you guys said. I feel like it's so specific for me, where games that are 80 to 100 hours, you really got to earn it for me. Particularly, I think of a game like Persona 5, which really did, or Persona 4 even, both of those really earned their runtime for me. Like, I was perfectly happy with how long they were. It's not to say that the pacing was perfect all the time, but it was good enough that I felt good playing it for that long. There's some other RPGs or JRPGs, whatever, it doesn't matter, that if I'm not hooked or engaged on a story perspective, you can't hold me that long. Even if the gameplay is holding up. For me, it's so much about the story and the characters. And I like a really good long 80-hour RPG, and you can really sit with these characters and really get to know them. I find that to be a huge benefit. But yeah, nothing wrong with a nice 15 to 20 hour romp in a game. I look for those, I think, often, because it is hard to commit to an 80-hour, 100-hour game, especially when there's so many games coming out that we all want to play. So really all depends. I got to respect the even shorter games too, the ones that are more the 8 to 12 range. If you can do a really tight 8 to 12 hours, sometimes those are the absolute best. I think
in 2D, I think that's especially true.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I feel like recent Resident Evil games overall kind of fit in that category.
Yeah, 10 to 15, I would say, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi-Fi Rush, I think, was like 7 or 8, and I loved that. Like, Hi-Fi Rush is really good, and it's like that's perfect length for a game like that.
Yeah,
again, this all depends on like what the game is.
Right, exactly. I think there's a place for everything.
Gonna...
I want 3 times a year. I'll play a 100-hour game for sure. 2 or 3 times a year, definitely.
Yeah, but you're not gonna want like a 5. You don't want a 5-hour JRPG, and you don't want like a 100-hour like fighting game. Like where you have to play like 100 hours to unlock
or a 2D Mario game that's 50 worlds with 30 stages each.
Yeah, let's just relax.
Colin, this will please you. I did a quick search of games that are too long or that too long and ruin the experience, and a Reddit thread came up.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 upvoted game that's too long and ruin the experience: Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yeah,
really?
I believe it. 2014 was a mysterious year.
What is it with people in Dragon Age?
I don't know.
We get a lot of shit for that, but I'm going to stand by it.
I don't care about Dragon Age at all. And I don't care about BioWare, and I don't care about what anyone says about any of that. Mass Effect was a long time ago, buddy. All right. Mark wrote in and said, "Hello, Sacred Boys. Are any of you fans of the dying media that is games-related magazines? I know the heady days of official PlayStation Magazine and its competitors are long gone, but there is now a vibrant independent scene bubbling away in the gaming undergrowth. Like me, do you agree that nothing beats a fresh magazine with a pristine page smell, or do you feel magazines are a relic from a bygone era, never to return to their former glory?" So it's funny. I'm curious to see what you guys think of this. I am an entrepreneur by nature and pretty successful. And I look at that space and I see lots of money. Like I see lots and lots of money in the print space to be made by the entrepreneur, the people that go after it effectively, do it well. This is what I was talking about with my strategy idea, right? And I see magazines like Nintendo Force that's run by my friend Lucas Thomas, who I used to work with at IGN. And it's a really great idea to do some high quality games coverage in a magazine format. But here's the problem. And this is what I think is very, very important. You can't, I think Nintendo Force does do this, but in my opinion, you don't want to do modern coverage of video games in a magazine. Instead, what I would think you would do with a brand like Nintendo or a brand like PlayStation that's old enough now is to do something like a look back. Here's what was happening 5 years ago in PlayStation. Here's what was happening 10 years ago in PlayStation. Here's an editorial. Here's a look back at a game. Here's a memory. Here's an interview. That kind of thing I think would make a lot of sense. And I think that people can make some pretty good money doing nostalgia-driven, collectible, high-quality print magazines in that regard, whether it's monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly. I don't know what that would look like. But I think the big mistake, in my opinion, would be to go after modern games coverage in a magazine format that's so old that I was a PSM subscriber, PlayStation Magazine subscriber, which was an awesome mag from the first the second issue. Technically, I bought the first issue, and then all the way until through college. And the magazine's relevance waned when the IGNs of the world kind of started to really come up and body it. But it was still fun to read the reviews and the previews and all of it, but it didn't have any relevance. And by trying to stay relevant with that product, that was the mistake. It should evolve into something that is less timely, but can still be monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, high quality, collectible. So as an entrepreneur, I can't help but look at that and be like, I wish I had time to even think about that kind of shit. Because I'm telling you, man, if you did it right, you can mine that kind of stuff. But as far as like a practical mass market, no, that stuff's dead, of course. Dustin, I'm curious what you think about this, about the idea of games related magazines and kind of the little cottage industry that's grown.
Yeah, I never had too many game magazines growing up. I did for periods of time get Game Informer. And so I have some very specific memories with reading Game Informer and really enjoying that aspect. But yeah, I think that the most of my thoughts are mainly just echoing what you said, Colin, in that it's clear why it's dead. To me, learning about what is happening in video games is so much more effective through visuals, specifically video, is where I go to learn about games. I love going on YouTube, and sometimes I'll just bring up the PlayStation YouTube channel is awesome because they post ads or I guess not ads, but just trailers for all kinds of games, big, small, whatever.
Yeah, our games are on there. Which is cool.
And so I like to just go and look at that for sure. But I think that you're right. There could be some cool market for more evergreen content, maybe something that if you had like great artists and people writing more interesting editorials about either older games or even there's some room, I think, for recent releases too, where it doesn't necessarily need to be like a review, or it can be like this viewpoint about this game. I think there could be cool. And people like having that novelty. Why are, or I guess I should say not the novelty necessarily, but physical media, in that people like to buy vinyl records. They still buy physical books, still buy physical games. So I think if the right product was there, that absolutely there could be a awesome gaming magazine that could still thrive.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how this all what happens in this space if like more powerful entities start coming up and how they handle it. Chris, where's your mind on this?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Game Informer. That was the one that I got. I would buy occasional OXMs and occasional PlayStation magazines every now and again if there was like a demo disc, or if I just saw one that like had a cover that caught my eye while I was at, I don't know, I think I would see them most reliably at Barnes and Noble and places like that. And it was cool, man. I liked reading them, and it's more than just like. I know that you can get a lot from the internet now, obviously in video form, but there is something different about like cracking open a magazine and like even just the personality of the spread, how they format things. It was just interesting and fun, and I thought it was. I still have so many Game Informers that I'm really glad that I still have them, because it's a treat kind of going back and looking through reviews and articles that were contemporary at the time. I think it's almost one of the more fascinating aspects of magazines in the first place. It's not necessarily like how they are in the moment, but almost how they are when you reflect on them and look back at them. And that's partially why I feel like there is still room for modern coverage. I just don't think it necessitates I don't think it needs to be timely if you have the right people writing. You know what I mean? Like if you have people who care and people who are like, oh, I know that guy, I respect that guy's opinion, I'll wait 3 weeks to see what he has to say about this. Even if I buy the game already, I'm just interested in what he has to say. And I know some YouTube reviewers who actually like they write out their reviews and then they kind of they format them in a way that you know they're in a video, right? But then there's like a text version of it that is almost printed out like a Game Informer type thing, like it's a magazine spread, and there's like it's formatted in that same way. And I think that's really cool. And I think there's a hunger for that in some way. I don't think it's massive. I do think, like Colin said, it's definitely more of a niche thing. But there's, I don't know, I think it could work. Absolutely, I love reading through those things still, and I'm sure a lot of people would.
Yeah, if you embrace the micro community as opposed to mass market stuff, and if you don't remain current by nature, I think you're in pretty decent shape. And I just feel like I loved reading the magazines too, and I'm older than you guys, obviously, but I loved reading like in PSM, they had like all the writers in the beginning, like all the editors and what they were playing and what they were doing. And I loved reading all that stuff. And it was, gaming magazines were part of the culture, a really, really important part of the culture. And we are really blessed today to not have that level of ignorance where we really don't know much about anything that's happening, where we're told what we're told, we're advertised to endlessly, we're lied to, no doubt, often, and misrepresented things. So we're in a much better position now, but there's no reason why you can't take advantage of that nostalgia and do something like meaningful and good that's also evergreen in that format. And for the person that cracks, or for the people that continue to crack those nuts, I mean, good for them, because I think you can do it. I think you can do it right. Oh. And I think that's really, it's fun. And I think it's cool. That's why I think Nintendo Force and stuff like that is great. All right, let's get the hell out of here. It's time to go. That's the end of this episode of Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. Chris, do you have any closing comments?
No, man. I'm going to make myself a very, 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 very heavy lunch. That's what I'm going to do.
Cool.
That's my goal right now.
Sounds great. What about you, Dustin? Any closing comments?
Food is absolutely on my mind right now. Particularly, I've been thinking about General Tso's for about 4 or 5 days now. I'm in the mood for some Chinese food. So maybe takeout is the move tonight. I'm not quite sure, but I don't know. We'll see.
I haven't had Chinese food in a while. It's not that big. It's not as big of a thing in LA as I thought it would be.
No, it's not.
The worst Chinese food I've ever had was in LA when I was there for E3 one year, which I was just shocked by, because I thought surely I know Chinese food, it's like Americanized Chinese food, but I thought surely in Los Angeles, where there's more than one race, as opposed to Butler, Pennsylvania, where there's very, very low diversity, will be better.
Yeah.
But no, Butler, yeah, better.
You're also on the
Chinese food.
East Coast. Chinese food is just like more of an East Coast thing. I've experienced. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on with that. I think LA is more Mexican and Mediterranean and stuff like that. Like you're more likely to get like out of this world stuff like that. But China, yeah, I haven't had Chinese food in ages.
All right, that's enough.
All right,
that's enough of the Chinese food talk. That's enough of the food talks. Enough of the PlayStation talk. It's time to go, my friends. Thank you for your time. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. We'll see you next time for more Sacred Symbols. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.